It all started about 8 months ago. There I was, just an idea in somebody's mind. And then, today, poof, life. It's kind of magic, you know?
What is going on, everybody? Thank you again for joining us on this amazing episode that we're going to have on Collection Wars. What's up, Michael? How are you?
Gabe, I'm good. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. I'm really excited for today's show, and I'm really looking forward to it. We have an amazing panel lined up today, guys. I mean, this is going to be amazing. So just to let you know, kind of ahead of time, we have Tony McVeigh joining us via audio. So it's a pleasure, obviously, to have Tony. We're going to have Kirk Thatcher on. We're going to have Tom Spina. We're inviting our buddy Lee, who is, you know, kind of the one who kind of kickstarted this project with Tom, and it's just going to be super exciting. So I guess without further ado, let's bring them on one by one. Let's bring on Kirk first.
Let's do it.
Let's see. What?
Shazam!
I mean, Captain Kirk beamed in.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kirk, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Kirk, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, Star Killer? Really?
I'm good, man. I love the hat, bro. I love the hat.
Is that your CB handle too, Star Killer?
It is.
Yeah. So next on our panel, we're gonna bring on Mr. Tom Spina with Regal Robot and Tom Spina Designs. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. How is everyone tonight? Good to see you, Kirk.
Good to see you,
long, man.
I know. Well, you live in New York. It's your fault.
I know. Yeah. There's nobody's perfect, right?
Right.
Tom, what's up, buddy? How you doing, man?
Good to see you as well, Michael. Hey,
yeah, always good. And
I feel like we're in those Brady Bunch boxes.
I know.
Exactly. I know. That's exactly what it's like.
Yes,
and then
yes.
On audio, on the phone, we have Mr. the one and only Tony McVeigh. Mr. McVeigh,
Bravo.
can you hear
Hi, everybody. How are you?
There you go.
Hey, how you doing, Tony?
Just fine. How are you?
Good, man. Really thankful that you took the time out of your Saturday, as well as Kurt and Tom, to be on our show, Collection Wars, tonight. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much. And last but not least, we have our buddy Lee Batten joining us as well.
Guys.
How are you, Lee?
Good.
Hey, it's one of the knuckleheads. What's
Look
up,
at that
Lee?
background.
What's going on?
Good to see you, Lee.
Though I thought Tony was Scottish. He doesn't sound very Scottish to me.
Tony, are you Scottish, Tony?
In a way, yeah. I lived there for a while until I was about 9 or 10. My father was from there. He was from Glasgow, so we all lived there till,
Oh, there you go.
they decided to move down to England. So yeah.
We expected you to talk more like Billy Connolly.
Yeah, we went over that again.
You watch your tongue there, Sonny Jim.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This is going to be such a fun show. Really appreciate it. So yeah, I mean, let's kind of get started. And I obviously we have a lot of questions we would love to ask, and kind of, get everything going. So I think the first thing we should talk about is obviously what inspired you, and I'll start with Tony. Kind of what inspired you as a kid to get into this type of business, to get into, making creatures?
Well, let's see if I can remember that far back. That was a long time ago. My dad took me to see a movie called Seventh Voyage of Sinbad.
Wow,
Have you heard of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, the special effects for that were done by Ray Harryhausen. When I saw that movie, it just blew me away. I'd never seen anything like that before. It captured my imagination, and I got into the details of it. In fact, trying to find out more about Ray Harryhausen and how he got into it and what he did and how he did what he did. And let's see, when I was about, I guess, 9, I think it was 9, I remember standing at a bus stop with my dad, and he got into talking about this old movie he'd seen years and years before about a giant ape climbing to the top of the Empire State Building, getting to the very top, and then swinging it by planes that were flying by him until they finally bumped enough bullets into him that they fell off to the streets below. I thought, that sounds interesting. I'd like to see that. I didn't get around to seeing it until I was about 13. It was on a double bill at a local theater with The Thing from Another World, starring James Arness.
Okay.
And that sort of cinched it for me. I thought, I have to get into this. This is very interesting to me. I want to do more of this if I can. I found out more about Ray Harryhausen and his work. And after I left art school, I was there for 3 years studying graphic design. And when I left, I couldn't find any work doing graphic design.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so a friend of mine gave me he told me about an ad he'd seen in a local paper about the Natural History Museum in London was looking for a model maker. So I applied, and I got the job. I ended up working there for 4 years in the model making and taxidermy department.
Oh, wow.
And I found out that the man in charge of that department was a fellow named Arthur Hayward. And I found out that he had been Ray Harryhausen's primary sculptor from Mysterious Island up until the Valley of Guanji. He'd done all the sculptures for Ray. He got no credit for it. And I had seen all this guy's work in all of Ray's movies. And that really blew me away. And I thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too.
Yeah.
So I found out that while I was working at the museum, that Ray was going to make another Sinbad movie.
Oh.
So I thought, if I don't jump on this, I'll never get another chance. So I called him up. He was listed in the phone book.
Mm-hmm.
I called him up and I asked him if he needed a model maker. And I told him what I did and where I worked. And we arranged to meet. And I took some samples of my work with me. And he seemed to be sufficiently impressed that he hired me. So I worked on Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger.
Oh, nice.
Wow, I remember that so well.
And
I know Tom remembers.
Yeah. What's that?
So I know Tom knows about that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I did a couple of creatures for him, the giant walrus and the baboon.
Yeah.
While I was working at the museum, it meant working in the evenings at the workshop, which I wasn't supposed to do. I could have been fired for doing that, but nobody ever found out about it.
Oh, jeez.
And so, those ended up in the movie. And I eventually left the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And started working for Jim Henson on The Dark Crystal.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I was on that for about a year or so. And when my duties for that were over, right about the time they started live action filming, I decided that might be interesting to come over to the States and see if I could find some more work over here, because there wasn't that much going on in England at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So with a friend of mine that I met on Dark Crystal, a fellow named Mike McCormick, who was an American. He was from Albuquerque. He was a puppet maker. We came over here, and we went to L.A., and we visited various workshops. Rob Bottin's workshop, he was just starting up on The Thing for John Carpenter. So we got a tour of that workshop. But there was no work going. We had to be members of the union to get into it. We weren't.
Yeah.
But we got a tour. We looked at a few other shops in L.A., and someone suggested we should come up to Northern California because the next Star Wars movie was starting up. And it was either me or Mike gave Phil Tippett a call.
Mm-hmm.
And he apparently had heard of me, and he invited us to come up. So we drove up from L.A. to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
We met with Phil and showed him what we could do. I mean, bunches of photographs from previous productions and so on.
Mhm.
And we got hired.
Wow.
Awesome. And this was obviously for Return of the Jedi, right, Tony?
Yes, correct.
Awesome.
And so we had to go back. We had to fly back to England and try and clear up our affairs. And a week later, we were back here in the States, and we started work.
Wow.
And I ended up working on that show for about 11 months. So it was an extremely interesting and extremely hectic project, but I'm sure glad I did it. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And we're showing, I have a picture here of kind of all of the creature shop with, you know, kind of all the puppets and all the props hanging. And we see you kind of in the back with Salacious and Mon Calamari in the background. And we also see Kirk. We see Kirk down there with some Rancor. Is that Effont
Mon legs, yeah.
Effont
Those are
legs.
outstanding.
Yes.
That's actually just what Kirk's legs look like when he takes his pants off. Don't make fun.
Actually, yeah, they just molded my legs, and
That's hilarious.
You saved them a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of money saved.
Yeah. So Tony, so then you started working on Return of the Jedi, and that was kind of your in here in the United States with the creatures and all that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I took about, 7 months off after that because I was completely burned out. I spent a year on the Dark Crystal and then followed by another year on Jedi. I didn't want to look at another piece of clay or a sculpting tool. I was done for a while.
Oh man, that is so cool. So actually, let me ask kind of Kurt the similar question, because obviously you guys both worked on Return of the Jedi on the creature shop. Kirk, what inspired you as a kid? How what got you into this?
It's funny. Ray Harryhausen movies. For me, it was Jason and the Argonauts, which I saw on TV. And King Kong. Those two kind of, blew my mind. And then growing up in LA, I knew that's where like creature effects guys were. So at about 14, I found Craig Reardon had done some articles for Cinemagic, which was a fan-based magazine for filmmakers and stop motion and makeup effects. And you could get it in Hollywood at a couple of the bookstores, magazine racks. And so same thing. I looked on information, found Craig Reardon. I called him up and I said, "Hey, I read your articles." And, and he was super friendly and helpful. If you don't know who Craig Reardon is, he did the creature stuff for Poltergeist. He did the creature on the plane wing for, what is it called? Terror at 20,000 feet for the Twilight Zone movie.
Twilight Zone. Yeah.
He's done a ton of stuff. And he had just done Galactica in LA. Anyway, so he was really helpful. And so he gave me some tips on how to, latex, where to buy it, alginate, stuff like that. And then, but movie-wise, it was really those two, Kong and Jason and the Argonauts. When Talos comes alive, that my head exploded. I just thought that was
That's one of the greatest combinations of stop motion animation and sound ever. It's so good, the sound on this.
It sells that it's 100, 300 feet tall.
Oh yeah.
And then and growing up in LA, it was much more of an option as a career to do special effects. So probably around 10 or 12, I'm like, I either want to do creature effects or work at Disney Imagineering. And so then I met Craig, and then the real big break for me was meeting Joe Johnston at 15 when Star Wars came out. His mom was at church with my mom, and my mom came home and said, "Oh, I met a lovely gal whose son worked on Star Wars." I said, "What's his name?" She goes, "Well, her name is so-and-so Johnson." I was like, "It's Joe Johnston." I'm like, she goes, "I think that's right, yeah." And I'm like, I have his sketchbooks. So I got to meet Joe, who was very kind, gave me a tour of ILM when it was still down here in Van Nuys. And that was just the luck of the draw. I grew up about a mile, or ILM was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from where I grew up. So Joe gave me a tour. They were just starting on Galactica. And I just stayed in touch with him and became friends. And then, was making creature stuff during high school. Made little stop motion movies, sculpted, kind of learned pretty much everything you could do rudimentary without any training. Sculpting, molding, painting with back then it was rubber cement. You could paint latex with rubber cement and painting tints. Mm-hmm. And then so I went to UCLA for the summer I graduated high school. Some buddies and I went up to visit Joe at the ILM in Marin County, the new version of it, which was only 2 years old at that point. And he gave us a tour of that, and that was amazing. There was a very large closet where all the ships were, and it was I just sat there and like, yeah. And I gave him this creature I'd made. It sort of looked like a wall mount, like a taxidermied wall mount, but it was a big fat demon kind of Jabba the Hutt kind of creature that I did for a movie I made with friends in high school. And so he gave it to the guys in the rubber room, which was Chris Wayless, Phil Tippett, and Ken Ralston, really, at that time, who were all working on Dragon Slayer and the End of Raiders, where the heads explode.
Yeah.
So I started UCLA as a film major, but they wouldn't let you touch a camera until you were a junior. And I was like, I've been making movies since I was 12. So I was frustrated. So the news was announced they were going to start working on this third Star Wars movie. So I called Joe and I said, hey, I'll make coffee. I just want to be a part of it. Sweet.
I get it. I get it.
I'll learn a lot more there than I am working at, or going to school. And it's funny because the timing was kind of remarkable. He said, well, who told you? I said, who told me what? He said, who told you? I just put your name on a list for people to interview for the Creature Shop. George wants to make one up here in Marin because he felt that Stuart Freeborn and the stuff going on in England, again, there was no internet or even fax machines at that point. He couldn't keep tabs on it. He wanted a shop there, and originally Phil Tippett and Chris Wailers were going to run it together. And then, so he gave my name. I came up, I interviewed with Tom Smith, who had just taken over from Jim Bloom, and showed my portfolio. And I knew how to do the things nobody wanted to do: make molds, mix paint, all the grunt work. And so they hired me because the real reason was there was no one in San Francisco who did that kind of work. And they weren't going to pay. George was notoriously tight-fisted. He wasn't going to pay Rick Baker or Craig Reardon or those guys to come up and work on his movie. So I was cheap, and I knew how to do the basic skills. So I started, and I think Tony and Mike came in about 2-3 months later. And that's the way we became the Jedi crew.
That's awesome. And so before I actually ask Tom kind of the similar question, I actually want to bring up, because so I grew up, obviously Return of the Jedi is my favorite out of all the films, and you could ask these guys. I'm religiously saying this.
Throne chair with.
I'm sitting on it. Yeah, exactly. I have a salacious chair.
We know.
So I remember growing up watching from Star Wars to Jedi, and I specifically remember watching you guys. I mean, literally, you guys having so much fun. And I actually found a couple little clips, and I specifically remember these as a kid, and I'm going to play them because you guys look like you were having just a blast. Here, let me put them on there.
Tony was acting.
Frankensteins frequently cracked up each other. It was a way of easing the strain of a long, hard job.
Oh, there's Tony. I see him running. With the Gamorrean chasing you.
I always loved the dog.
That was Jeannie Loren's dog.
Who's that now?
Oh, that was Jeannie Loren, the gal you just saw. It was her dog.
Oh, and then I remember this part too.
Oh, yeah.
This was all staged. It looks like we're having fun because they beat the day off work and just goofed around.
Was it all staged? Oh, look at that. This, and then here, and then this is the picture, right?
There you go. Yeah.
We were having fun because they gave us a day off to screw around in front of cameras, but
that's funny, and that awesome. Led to this picture, right? That's exactly.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Which is so awesome, and yeah, I see. Right, obviously there's Kirk, there's Tony in the back. I see Phil right there, Phil Tippett. Man, it's just such awesome piece of history, really. You know.
And then you've got people like Tom Spina to take the torch and take it to another level of, for all of us collectors and wannabes. Just live and breathe it, you know.
Just do my best to pay homage and live up to what they put out there back then. And,
yeah. Well, Tom, sure. So you know, basically, I kind of wanted to ask you kind of a similar question, right? As a kid, kind of what inspired you, you know, to get into creature making?
You know, prior to Star Wars, it was King Kong. It was Mighty Joe Young. They used to play them back to back on Channel 9 out here on Thanksgiving. And I thought it was like a giant 4-hour monkey movie. And I didn't realize, like, I thought he fell off the thing and then he was okay. He just got a little smaller and, you know, went back to the jungle for a while. It's a much happier movie that way. But, you know, so you know, Star Wars comes out and that the storybook, and there's like a 2-page spread with the cantina where it's, you know, just all the aliens. There's some of the Freeborn stuff that was like, you know, Stuart Freeborn and Nick Maley and Graham and Kay and all the people on that side. And then there's like some of the Baker aliens where you got, you know, stuff that Rick made, stuff that Doug Beswick and Phil Tippett and John Berg and Lane Liska and Rob Bottin even. And, you know, all these people that were my heroes, even though I didn't know who they were, I just knew that was like, oh, I'm 5, but this is what I want to do for the rest of my life now. Right. And awesome. You know, it's really kind of that simple. Like it was locked in. It wasn't a straight path, but you know, it was the inspiration point was there. And then when Star Wars to Jedi, that the making of a saga came out, that really was at the time. I don't know. That was the only way to get a good look at a you know, the behind the scenes of the creature effects type stuff. And I poured over that. And it was you know, now we had VHS. This is like 83, 84. We had just gotten a VHS player at my house. So, you know, I didn't have to just watch it once when it aired on TV and, you know, patiently wait out the commercials. I could watch it over and over again, and I could pause it and look at, you know, like, oh, what are they doing? He said that's latex and rubber. Okay, what does that mean? Like, what is latex? What is rubber? I'm only 8, you know, or whatever, you know. But well, I guess no, would have been 10, 11, whatever. But young enough, and being here in New York, unfortunately, I didn't have people I could ask about that stuff. There weren't a ton of magazines like that at the local corner shop that I would get my magazines at, and my Star Wars comics and my, you know, my various Marvel titles I'd bring home. So eventually I started to find, you know, Famous Monsters of Filmland once in a while, Starlog, Fangoria. And then even, you know, as I got into high school, I thought like maybe I could be a makeup effects guy. Like there's people doing this. And I was learning a little more about the craft here and there, and found Tom Savini's book. And that really was like this is like a how-to manual, you know, on making this stuff. And would give you like, you know, formulas and how-tos on casting latex and making foam and running stuff like that and doing molds and what an undercut was, which, you know, trying to do molds before you know what that is, it doesn't work as well. So, you know, there's all that going on. There's this huge Muppet influence, too, that's happening because the Muppet Show hit around the same time as Star Wars and just was this magical thing where, you know, life was brought into these lifeless things. And, yeah, there it goes. It's, you know, and it's in you. Once you start doing that, like, it doesn't go away. You just, you know, and obviously Kirk knows the Muppets. It's that all mixes together, and then, you know, you get there's this computer graphic revolution that starts happening right around the time I'm hitting high school, and I'm finding all these different avenues to be creative. I wanted to make movies, I wanted to make videos, I wanted to put laser blasts into my videos, you know, and I just kept feeling limited by the technology of the time, and somehow the practical stuff just always stayed the same. You know, the tech kept changing. Computers kept changing, maybe it was a video toaster on an Amiga, maybe it was something else, maybe we were trying to do blue screen or whatever, and it was always a pain, but I could always just sculpt the monster. So that stuck, and it wasn't until I worked in TV on the technical side. I had a switcher. I jokingly, we all used to sit around pretending we were blowing up Alderaan, with like a little handle on an old Grass Valley switcher. And it was all the while, though, making monsters and learning eventually, teaching myself and reading a lot about restoration and things like that. And then applying that mix of the special effects side and the museum side together to make kind of a new approach to restoring old foam latex pieces. And it was something nobody could really do at the time or was doing very much. Right. And that sparked Tom Spina Designs all those years ago. And that really gave me something that I could go to full time and bring a bunch of people on. And over the years, knock on wood, everything's been growing and growing. And Regal Robot sprang out of some of the theming work and stuff we were doing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a very long, very short version of why I'm here.
No, thank you, Tom. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it sounds like a lot of the similar, influences, right? King Kong, some of those early stop motion, characters. Sounds like there's a common thread there.
For sure.
Amongst those. So let me ask Tony. So Tony, I know once you were working on Return of the Jedi, you, and I'm going to bring up some pictures. You sculpted the body for the Gamorrean Guard. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was actually fabricated. I think I did 3 of those.
Oh.
So they were formed over they were built up over a body casting of somebody in the creature shop. I forget who it was now. But yeah, they were built up out of polyfoam and then covered in some kind of fabric, and then eventually rubber skin on the arms and legs, which I then painted.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I'm showing a couple pictures of the Gamorrean.
Dave Carson sculpted the face.
Oh,
David sculpted the original maquette for we call them pig guards, with the Gamorrean Guard, and then he made the full size one. And it's funny, if you ever see it, you can see in some of the Lucasfilm archive books, the maquette of the original pig guard was much more gnarly. He had very wrinkled and was scarier. And when Dave made this big thing, I said, where did you take all the texture out? And you took all the nastiness out. He goes, well, I thought it'd be easier for you to mold, which I was kind of like, it's for you. Also, he said, I think it'd be a better toy. It looks more like a toy. I'm like, yeah, it looks more like a toy.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So I remember I was very disappointed because the maquette was really cool. It looked like what I always imagined orcs would have looked like, which kind of still is. But he just had a bigger jowl and a much more crenellated, wrinkly.
I know that maquette specifically. We've looked at it real closely at the archives, and it is a beautiful sculpt. That little.
I would love to do a mask or something of that design.
Yeah, like what it was intended to be. That would be amazing.
Yeah. There you go, Tom. Got another idea coming right there.
I know, dang.
All right, so let me bounce back to Kirk really quick, because we found a picture here. So you worked on some of the Mon Calamari.
I set up the paint shop and painted most everything that Phil didn't paint. If it was painted in the movie, it was either I or Phil. Well, Tony, I think, painted Salacious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that was like his own thing. But most every creature in there. So I painted all the Akbars except for the one with the dialogue. Phil painted that one based on the maquette that I think he did. I think he did that one. Chris Wallace did a bunch of maquettes for creatures that we made, but Chris had left the shop when it really kicked in. He started his own place and then went on to do Gremlins.
So two quick things here. One, is that a happy face and sad face painted with an airbrush on your coat there?
Yeah.
Tragedy in the paint room.
Phil Tippett did that. I still have that coat. Yeah.
Do you? Oh, that's outstanding.
I still have that coat. I couldn't wear it for $100,000, but I still have it. It's covered in latex and resin and urethane. Coat of many compounds, and George signed the shoulder.
Oh wow,
awesome.
That's so cool.
The second thing was, did you ever see that Stewart's team actually did a take on Akbar, and it looks very similar to the maquette, where the maquette has much smaller eyes and shorter eye sockets. It's very pink, and pretty smooth, not a lot going on. Whereas the final has a lot of characters, just beefier in general. But someday I'll dig up a picture of that. It turned up when Stewart retired in just, a box somewhere. And it was like, I never even had heard that they had done a take on this. But they got a Bible of photos of the maquettes, and that was one they tried.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And Kirk, you also, I found this picture right here. That's you working on Newnum, right?
That's Stuart Ziff, our mechanics guy, being molded. We're doing an alginate cast on him. He's breathing through a straw. You can tell. I knew it was Stuart because you could see the hairy chest. We took a head cast of Stuart Ziff and for our medium head, and then Judy Elkins for who was you can see her in the picture there. She was a sculptor and did some fabrication for our smaller head. We measured everybody and said, okay, who's got the biggest head? Who's got the smallest head? And I think Stuart was either the medium or the large. He had a big noggin. And so, yeah, that's Wesley Seeds, Phil, and I doing a life cast on him. We're just dumping a bucket of algae.
Just dumping it. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny when you can smell a picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, anybody who's been in that situation will say, "Yep, I know what that smells like."
Tom, are you familiar with this, Tom? Are you familiar with this? I'm sure you are, buddy. Yeah. And hey, just real quick to all of our live viewers, Gabe and I are absolutely majorly geeking out. We do see all of the comments, and we thank every single one of you guys for joining us on a Saturday night. Thank you so much. I'm sure you guys are on all just like Gabe and I. And we are just pumped over everything that's going on. I can't even believe this.
And we'll get to some comments in a little while.
Absolutely.
So I also got a picture here with Kirk. It looks like you're puppeteering there.
Yeah, that's okay. So we built Neum Nub, and people kind of blow their circus and explain to them that he was a puppet for all his dialogue scenes. They thought he was a mask, and he made a mask for when he's running or walking around. But most of the scenes with Lando, or all the scenes in the cockpit, he's Mike Quinn puppeteering him. But we had to test it. Wow. So Mike, I've teased Mike forever that this reveals who really did Neum.
Right.
That's Tony there on the eyebrows or eye blinks. And then there's another angle on that shot, and I think it's Eben Stromquist was also doing. He's got the cables that are running kind of out between my legs.
We had those air hoses coming out too.
Bladders for his cheeks. We had bladders in his little cheek flaps to get them to do that.
And that's not a foam latex head, right? That's a thin latex skin over poly.
No, that was a foam latex head. We did both. The mask was just slip latex on urethane.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
And this was a foamed face, and then the back of the head and the ears were. Well, you know what? Hold on. Yeah, no, it had to be because we had. I
was trying to say even like the bladders. Like, how much pressure would you have to put on that if that was slipped?
Yeah. No, it was a foam face, and again, I painted. Usually made more than one of these things. Dave Bodro just said nerds. You're a nerd. Sorry.
He is a nerd. David is a nerd.
It was through Dave.
I want to actually just really brief. I want to thank Dave for kind of linking us up and kind of getting this set up. Thank you again, David.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he's not on the call, so we can't.
No, he's not. He's not.
We're all waiting for him to say you're welcome.
I know exactly.
We'll thank him next week with B as Gay, but
yeah, that's right. We'll see you next week.
It's funny in that so much of this movie was a puppet movie. I actually gave a talk at in New York a few years ago with Brian Froud's wife, Wendy, and she had worked on Yoda, the original, and sculpted Yoda. And we were talking. I said, this whole movie's a puppet film. Most of the villains are puppets. I mean, if they have dialogue. The Rancor, again, the other one that blows people away is the Rancor was the size of Kermit the Frog. He's this big. He's just a 24-inch. And that's from his feet to his head. So it's really a puppet movie, and that's why having guys like Tony on it who had done Dark Crystal was really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the next.
I was just gonna say. I mean, there's that nexus again. You know, it's like the Star Wars monsters, the puppetry, and puppetry is just it's a way to create creatures that aren't human proportioned.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of more puppets, Mr. Tony, I know you also sculpted size noodles, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, I have a picture here of you kind of doing it looks like you're still sculpting I'm assuming the master, right?
The mouth, yeah. It was that was the the foam latex
section.
Yeah,
foam latex section, exactly.
And
what am I working on in that picture?
On the snout.
Looks like the clay sculpt of her snout.
I know the one you're talking about. I've seen that.
What did we call? I forgot what we call her because all these names George came afterwards.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
I don't remember what we called that thing.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So Tony, was there any kind of inspiration with that, or were you basing it off of like some concept art or anything like that?
It was based primarily on the maquette that someone had done. I don't know who made the maquette. Actually, maybe it was Phil.
It was Phil. It was Phil.
Was it Phil?
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
And in the documentary, I found a section where actually George is in there having a meeting with all of you guys, and when he kind of decides he's gonna make her or him, I don't the singer. Let me play that really quick.
Yeah, that really freaked Phil out.
Oh, there's the maquette.
There's the maquette.
Tony.
There's Tony sculpting it.
Well over $1 million was spent on creatures.
Yeah, and then this one.
Would be to have a vocalist.
A little quiet.
So we can have her be the singer. Sure. Yeah, it'd be great.
She's got such a tiny little mouth. She's going to sing lyrics. We're going to have to articulate her mouth.
Well, yeah, it would have to be. What it means is we'd have to figure out a way of opening the mouth and making it at least open and close. Thing is, it doesn't have to be articulate. All it has to do is be able to open and close. It's a binary system, which it goes like this, wow, this, and that gives us some room to come up with some lyrics and make a song.
That is awesome.
Oh my gosh!
Phil was terrified.
Oh,
I mean, the mouth is the size of a quarter, and he's like, "Oh yeah, just make it open and shut." Thanks, George. On a snout that's supposed to articulate.
And in the little short, we actually see Tony kind of as soon as George says that, like Tony goes over and touches the mouth. Like, wait a second, how are we gonna?
Bro, how am I gonna do this?
Do you recall that, Tony?
I have no recollection of that whatsoever. No.
Yeah, it's like
That's
it
awesome.
actually shows you. Yeah, it shows you like George is saying, "Yeah, let's just we can make her the mouth, articulate," and you go and kind of open up the mouth a little bit.
That's so crazy. Hey, to Tony and Kurt, if each one of you could just take a short moment to remember the times that George Lucas would come into the room and the respect, obviously, that all you guys had for him. What was it like? What was the persona and what was going on in the room when George would come in and talk to you guys about concept, about the ideas, about what you guys were actually working on? What was that like? I would like to know. Tell me that. Starting out with Kurt.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was very much like in that little video clip. He's just kind of quiet, and you go, it would be it'd be neat if this guy, or I think, he wasn't like, all right, here's what it's going to be. He was very much a small presence. Typically, we're all dead silent because he's the boss. The early meetings were with all the maquettes, and he would just kind of walk around the room. We had like 70 maquettes, and he would kind of pick one up and look at it and go, this one, I like that one. Just really not effusive and not he was just quiet. I mean, everyone said George is really shy, and I don't know, shy is not the right word, but he was a man of few words. He had a dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
He'd pick up something and say, some kind of little comment, but it wasn't, it's the opposite of what you kind of think of as like a big, producer director. He was very quiet. And people I know have worked with him. Doug Chang has worked with him now for, like 30 years. And I said, he worked on so much, literally being the guy George works with. And he goes, yeah, no, he's the same. This guy comes in, is like, I like that. He finally got a stamp that it would just be like thumbs up, or thumbs down. And he just doesn't like conflict, I guess.
Yeah.
Tony.
Tony,
I remember that. He was very, very quiet and self-effacing. I barely remember him coming by and looking at stuff. Actually,
wow,
really quiet guy.
Do you have any memorable kind of moments, Tony, with George that kind of just stick out in your mind?
To be honest, no, I don't, because like I say, he was very quiet and self-effacing. I hardly remember him coming by, actually.
Yeah.
He would usually...
Yeah, it was very strange.
He would just talk to Phil. I mean, it was kind of Phil and Patty, who was our coordinator, and we would all be standing around to hear it, but he didn't really interact with us. Even when we're all there, when the maquettes were being reviewed, we were just there kind of up against the wall, so we could all, have a group hive mind in what he said.
Yeah.
And Phil would just kind of talk to him about it, and George would, I'm not kidding, he'd just be like, okay, I like this. Or he'd just look at it and put it down. It wasn't a big, and I think we put red dots, little red, sticky dots on the ones he liked.
Yeah.
I've seen those on some of them. So, you can spot them in the vintage photos too.
Yeah, he would just Patty, Phil would just put a dot. Okay, that's one of the ones we're making.
So, Kirk, I know you made a couple of those maquettes. Tony, did you do any of the maquettes as well?
No, those were all done by the time I was hired, so I just used those as reference for what I had to do.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they were like the first few ones.
That was all prior to me joining.
Yeah.
You know what blows my mind is obviously George Lucas, the soul of the Star Wars saga, but what made that was all of you guys, the modelers, the sculptors, the painters, the script. I mean, everyone that was involved, the music side of things. It was just a collaboration of such skill, and all you guys were out of the gate learning this stuff, and everyone was just throwing things together. And today, like Tom, I mean, he's into making sure that everything that he builds is exact to the duplicate of things that you guys did, and he's on mark on everything that he does. But it's so crazy. I hear these stories with these modelers, the studio scale modelers, and everybody that put these models together, and how y'all threw this stuff together. And all these years later, the reference and everything that you guys have done, it was like a miracle happening all together. And that's why the fandom is crazy 45 years, almost 50 years later, you know, and you guys to have been a part of this growing miracle at the beginning of it was just awesome.
Well,
it's so crazy.
The first three movies were all made by people under 30. I mean, I would say at ILM, sorry, not the crew. But I mean, I started at 19. Tony, you were what, in your late 20s? I mean, everybody was under 30 and didn't know what we didn't know. And if you look at Star Wars, Joe Johnston was like 24, 25 when he designed the ships and did the storyboard. And so I think George realized you can get guys right out of college and you don't have to pay them very much. And there's tons of enthusiasm. They don't have wives and kids. And they throw themselves to these things. And it was for me, and again, I was really young at the time, but it was like going to like art college, you know, filmmaking school.
Boot camp.
Like you said, Mike, we were making it up. Nobody had done, you know, all the techniques were there, but nobody had used them a lot of times in the ways we were doing it. And I think that's the fun of it. It wasn't become like, okay, we're just making a bunch of masks, you know. All right. No, it's like we're doing a hand puppet that's going to be a giant creature, and we're going to do a giant creature that's going to have 4 people inside of it. Stuff that
Yeah.
had not done, and I think that was when you said we were having fun. I think that's the core of the fun is we were making stuff up as we were making stuff, and I think that was part of the joy.
That looseness. I mean, it's it's so much more fun to do that first take than to try and replicate something. Like that is night and day in terms of the type of work.
Understand, Tom.
And I think, and this is my rant, I think you don't have that anymore. I mean, all these studios, when they get successful, even ILM now I mean, there's still really creative people there, but it's a bunch of cubicles with people on computers.
Yeah.
And it's the management is what's grown. Like I said, the artist, the sculptor, still a sculptor, designer is a designer, painter is a painter. Now you have 7 layers of management and marketing.
Yeah.
And people are like, why did they make all these great movies in the 80s and they're not making them now? Because you don't just have George Lucas going, I've got 40, 30-year-olds and under, and here's my idea. Go with it. That's what Benson did. I'm going to get a bunch of cool creative people. You guys have fun. Here's the direction. And, let's all jump on that ship and make it sail. And I think when you're asking what it was like, that was the joy of it. And there were guys there. I mean, Dennis Muir and Phil Tippett, Ken Ralston, who a super unsung hero. He was the one guy there, in my mind, who could do everything. He could write, direct, act, sculpt, paint, and it was all top notch. And he was I think he was one of the Universal stories of geniuses that kind of don't hit the level where guys who are really good at 2 things instead of everything become, I mean, Ken ran Sony ImageWorks for years, but man, he literally had a finger in everything. He was designing maquettes, he was sculpting, he was doing shots, building. He was amazing, and a guy that just doesn't get a lot of. He's also kind of a recluse. I don't think he wants notoriety, but I mean, everybody, Ken Ralston.
There's a thing on Netflix now, the movies that made us, and they do one on Jurassic Park, and they actually got Ken out for that. I think it was that one. Maybe it was one. It was a lot of fun, and it's nice to see him get some credit because like you said, kind of unsung a little bit.
We would have movie nights where people would show their movies from high school, junior high, however, Super 8 movies, and they'd show them in the screening room.
That's awesome.
That's
cool. A movie called Bounds of the Imagination, and he did it in high school, and it had stop motion and laser effects and matte paint. I mean, just everything that was state of the art in the 70s that he did at home. And I just remember going, God, I'm glad he got here before me. And then every generation, everyone's got so much more talent, and because there's schools that teach it now, and we were all self-taught. So
right.
So had that energy about it.
So speaking of kind of the how you guys were testing, right? Testing the boundaries, really. You guys, both you and Tony, worked on another very special project that eventually ended up changing, which was the Rancor, right? So originally, right? Tony, you worked on the Rancor, the bodysuit, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And Kirk, you were inside of that suit, right?
Yep, for a day and a half.
Yeah. So Tony, can you tell us a little bit about that process, Tony? Just anything that you might recall.
Let's see what I can remember. I think George came up with the idea of trying to make it as a costume because he wanted to try the Godzilla approach for that thing because I think at one point they considered using stop motion for it, and I don't think George wanted to go down that road. He wanted to try something that was quicker and a little bit easier to do. So somebody put me up for the job of building the costume, the exterior of the costume. And there was a small team of people, and Kirk was one of the people on that, constructing that thing. Mm-hmm. I think it was like 5 or 6 people, if that's right, Kirk. I can't quite remember now.
Well, because there was molding and casting, and you were carving and sculpting the foam, and then mixing it.
Right. I sculpted the head too for it, and that was molded and cast. And we had to make some changes to the proportions because the Rancor has really long arms, But that wouldn't have worked with a costume because the fingers were closed by cable pulls. And if you make the forearm too long, the person inside of it simply can't move the fingers. There's too much inertia to overcome, too much resistance. So we had to shorten those, which kind of compromised the look of the character, I thought. He looked really good with those long arms, and I was ashamed to see those go. But we did finish the costume, and I had to build up the shapes out of foam, Scott foam as it was, and then color them in latex and paint the thing. And then they did some tests. And I don't think anybody on that team really believed that building a costume for that character was the way to go. I sure didn't. I didn't think it was going to work out. And it turned out they went back to using a puppet. And I think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just to fill in some of the gaps, it was designed as a stop motion puppet, and it had, like Tony said, giant arms and huge fingers, like these huge, very scary claws. And then I was in the screening room when we were looking at something. It might have been the Num test or something, and George was there, and we started talking about the Rancor, and George goes, I think you guys should, I don't want to do, like Tony said, I want to do it stop motion. I think you should do a guy in a suit. And there was just like this silence. Phil's like, oh no, that's really not going to look good. You know, it's not designed. George is like, come on. I mean, this is about as George would get. Come on, you guys can show those guys at Toho how to do better. And I remember Dennis Murin was there and Phil, and they were just like, oh boy, it's just, you know, those things look really hokey. And George is like, well, do it better. You know, it's like, it's a challenge. So like Tony said, we all went back like, this is such a dumb idea. My joke was Phil put me in the suit to help prove what a bad idea was. Because I was not a suit. In fact, it was built, Tony, if you remember, it was built for a stunt guy who was about 5'8". And, you know, yeah, a dancer stunt guy, and we put him in the suit, and he just kept going, falling over. So he put on the suit and go. The other thing that is insane about it is, so you couldn't see anything. The head, it was like wearing a garbage can over your head. Your left arm, was in the creature's claw hand that worked. The right arm was puppeteered by Phil and Dave Carson there in that picture, working on an extension out the elbow. And they strapped a Sony monitor, which back then was the size of a loaf of bread. It was a little like 6-inch, 4-inch monitor, but you had to strap it. Again, it was like strapping a shoebox to your chest. And it was black and white reverse. So you're seeing what was on the camera. And then it was flipped and black and white. So your head is down, because I'd wear the damn thing.
Yeah.
Your head is down. Your right hand is working the head and the jaw. So you're doing this to make it look left and right and open the jaw. My left hand was in the one arm there was probably a 1.5 foot extension to make the arm longer, because that's obviously not my hand and its hand. And also you had to stand. If any of you played football, there's a stance called a quarter eagle, where your knees are bent and your knees are bent, your head is straight down, looking down like at your belly button. This monitor. All the weight is on the front of you, because that head is heavy and the arms are heavy. So you have to you're bent at the knees at about 45 degrees, keeping your weight back. And then it's like, okay, now act like a monster. They built a little set out of styrofoam, stalactites and stuff. And they smoked it up, and they were over cranking it. And then Phil's yelling, okay, turn left. and Tony sculpted a pig guard that was about 2 feet tall. That was a boring guard that was in scale with the suit, because this was all done after principal photography, I think.
Yeah. And
so I had to cast it and then mold it in gelatin, because the idea was that he would bite it and rip it apart, like rip off an arm. So we made a green gelatin pig guard, which weighed a ton.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if we even tested it with it, but
I think I might have found it. Right? Is it that? Yep. And there's George talking about it. He's telling him that he wants him to look at Luke.
Yep, chewing on him.
And he, slurps it up, gobbles it up, and disappears.
Yeah. You remember that this whole scene from the documentary.
Art director Joe Johnston sketches the new ideas. From his sketches, Joe created a storyboard for Phil Tippett, who played the Rancor in this early incarnation. Yes, that's Phil underneath that rubber suit.
He's like hitting the rock.
Miniature special effects photography. His colleagues, Richard Edlund and Ken Ralston, did our space shots. The technique for animating a classic fairy tale situation, the dragon in his lair, is itself.
There's the monitor.
It was used in Japanese monster movies.
And there's Tony helping Phil out of the costume.
That's not Tony, that's Ed Hirsch.
Oh, that's yeah. That's
not enough hair.
Not enough hair.
Though, the Rancor's cave
No,
was
me,
used
no,
to
he did.
proportions. It was about 30 inches high.
There it is.
The Rancor himself.
And then it ultimately became the puppet, right?
Yeah.
That is such a cool thing. Tony, anything else that you remember, dealing with that? Any other difficulties that you remember with the Rancor?
Just all of it, just from beginning to end. It was a real pain in the neck to make. I think I did. I think I sculpted the pig guard for it too. Is that right, Kirk? Was it me that did that?
I sculpted the little 2-foot high pig guard. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
And Tony also did, if I'm not mistaken, the big giant full-sized hand that Mark Hamill has to go into.
Yes, that I was gonna.
The big hand, I did do that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I was gonna show that from the scene, and it's the same hand that obviously grabs the Gamorrean guard as well, but you could see it's kind of cut into the scene, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's real effective.
A lot of time on that thing. I saw it.
There it is.
I don't know. I almost wonder if that one wasn't a comp, actually.
Oh, you
that
think?
wasn't the puppet hand in the foreground.
Oh, maybe.
Oh, good.
Now, Tony, did you sculpt the tiny pig guard, the little 4-inch tall one?
I don't remember doing that. No, I don't know who did that.
Yeah, it's probably Randy or Phil. Randy did.
Yeah. Well, Randy sculpted the final Rancor, didn't he?
There's the big hand.
There's the hand. There it is. Look at that. That is so cool.
Hey, Gabe, I don't know about you, bro, but
I know I'm geeking out right now. So Tony, on anything that you remember about the giant hand, as far as, do you remember approximate just size wise? I mean, obviously a full size man had to fit inside of the hand. Very King Kong-ish, right?
Yeah, it was. It was very much that way. Yeah, I don't remember the exact size of it, but it was bloody big. And it took a long time to finish it too.
Wow. And it just looked, and it's so seamless though too on the screen, like going back and forth from the puppet to the larger hand.
Well, as I recall, you couldn't see that much of it. It was very low key light. I mean, you didn't see too much in the way of detail or the shape of the thing. It was pretty extreme close up, I think.
Yeah.
And that too was that you sculpted that in Scott foam over a big armature, and then we ran skins and it wasn't sculpted in clay, anything that big. Except the Java is the only thing I think that was actually sculpted, as the size it was. Most of the stuff we did was done in skins.
I don't know. Effantmon is pretty huge.
That's
I remember seeing pictures of you guys working on the mold for Effantmon.
Yeah,
and I got a hernia just looking at the mold. I was just like, oh, my back. I looked at the picture.
What I love is Tony sculpted that in 2 days.
Oh wow!
That
is huge.
Well, I had to because it was wet clay, so I had to work fast, and it was middle of summer, and things were drying out really fast, so I had to really move on that thing.
You whack that thing together, so it's basically a giant wall mask. It's just flat in the back, and then we knew that the coat would basically drape over it. So he sculpted this literally almost 6 foot high face. Yeah. And then Wesley and I made this giant plaster mold. And then, it was just latex. I keep saying silicone, latex and urethane foam. And then there was basically a harness that you wore, and then the hands were sculpted separately. Did you do his hands too?
I think the hands were from another character that Phil did.
Yeah, it might have been for what's his name?
Hermie Yodel's hands, maybe.
I think so. Yeah.
I think they were.
I never looked closely, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. You look at all of these movies. There's always hand reuse.
Yeah.
The first movie, everybody's either got the "It's Alive" baby claws, or they've got those hoof hands that Nick Maley sculpted. You know?
Do you know that the reason Hermie Yodel's called Hermie Yodel?
No.
We called him Hemorrhoid. Big hemorrhoid, so we just called him Hemorrhoid, and then George would take these names and scramble them.
Yeah.
And they became Hermie Yodel, which is just hemorrhoids. I mean, almost all of them.
That's hilarious.
Well, speaking of F-Mon, right? And it's a great segue to kind of the star of today's show.
Well done, Gabe.
Right? Yeah, I did my research. So, Tony, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between F-Mon and Salacious Crumb, please?
Well, let's see now. When the F-Mon costume was finished, as I recall, Phil came to me one day and said, "We'd like to put a little creature on his shoulder or his arm, like a parrot with it, no, like a pirate with his parrot, his pet parrot. So, can you design something that we can construct and put in that role?" So I went home that night and I sat down and I drew something. It was a cross between a parrot and a monkey. And I brought it back the next day and showed it to Phil, and he said, "Yeah, go ahead and make that thing." It was just as simple as that. There was hardly any thought given to it. So I went ahead and constructed this thing. It was mainly fabricated. The body, arms and legs were all fabricated. And the head was sculpted and cast in foam latex. And the neck was a fabric sleeve with latex glued over it. It was very, very basic and simple. It didn't have any facial articulation. It couldn't blink. It couldn't move his eyes because it didn't need to. It was a background character. And we all thought, you're going to see it for 3 seconds, and that'll be that. And so I finished it and painted it. And eventually, the story I heard was that the director, Richard Marquand, saw it and said, "We need to put this thing on Jabba's tail so it can act like Jabba's pet, his pet parrot-type creature." So that's how it got promoted to the front there. It was never intended to be an up-front and central character. It's always a background character.
That is...
Speaking of naming, because of the Hermie Yodel story, I was there when he got his name. Mike, what was Mike's last name? McCracken?
Yep. Mike McCormick?
Mike McCormick. Sorry. We had we had like 4 Mikes. Mike McCormick was talking about something, and he said he was talking about his shoelaces, but he said shoelacious. And Phil laughed, and we said that's what we should call the creature that Tony had made, Salacious. And then George said, change it to Salacious and added the crumb, but we called it Salacious.
That's unbelievable.
It was Mike McCormick mispronouncing shoelaces as shoelaces.
Yeah, that's funny. Now, Kirk, I read somewhere online, even a little bit kind of quirkier story that you guys had a kind of a rough day and you went out, I guess, to somewhere and had a couple drinks, and then I guess the slurring, right? Is that where it came from?
I think Mike was just always a little slurry. No, we would have. I mean, this is back in the days when you could have beers at the end of the workday. So it might have been. Yeah, we didn't go anywhere. We had a bunch of beers in the fridge, and they just bring them out. And we'd all have a beer and just kind of calm down from the end of the day. And it was nice. It was a nice little tradition. Nobody got drunk. It was just
So shoelaces. That's
shoelaces.
Awesome. Shoelaces.
Where the name came from.
So Tony, how did it, like, when you heard that they were gonna move him from F-Mon to Jabba's throne, what was that like? Were you just like, oh man?
Oh, I was totally surprised by that. I didn't expect that ever to happen. I just thought it was a background character who was going to stay there. I had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think they kind of pulled it off pretty well. But I just wish I'd put some moving eyelids or moving eyeballs in there, so it had a little bit more character to it. But it seemed to have worked okay. I don't know.
Well, and Tim Rose gets credit for kind of giving him the personality and everything, because he.
Yeah, it's true, but I'm just talking about the technical aspects of it, just to give it a bit more character. But yeah, it worked out.
Well, before we get a little bit more into the Salacious, because obviously Regal Robot and Tom and Tony, I mean, you guys just recently put out this amazing replica. But before that, I think Kirk, you were a puppeteer for this as well, right?
I puppeteered Salacious in the special, the making over the Jedi.
I got it.
With my boy Gabe.
Some creatures inhabit our dreams and
I
nightmares.
wish
Some
I had
come to
this
us directly from the movies, like this character, Salacious Crumb. He is only one of over 60 weird and strange creatures to emerge out of the fantasies of the men and women who work here at the Star Wars Monster Workshop. In the movie, he plays Peter Lorre to Jabba the Hutt's Sidney Greenstreet. He sits at his blubber ship's right hand and gives people like Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia a pretty bad time.
And then we got there's a couple scenes in here.
This guy, he's ugly and bad. Look what he did to C-3PO.
Not my eyes, Datu! Help! Quickly, Datu!
Salacious says he's depraved because he's deprived. But some creatures have accepted and enjoyed the way they look.
Enough of this serious talk. I'd like to regale you now with, oh, I'm ugly as sin. 'Cause beautiful's out ugly's in. If you're ugly like me, you're in good company. 'Cause there's millions of us who are ugly.
At the Industrial Light and Magic Workshop outside San Francisco, George Lucas and over 140 people began in 1980 to design and build not only ugly, but bizarre creatures for Return of the Jedi.
Reuse.
More than 60 alien creatures were built in 6 months, many of them being charged with life by cables, sacks, bladders, and pipes.
And then finally, there's one more scene in there where they
do anything. He doesn't pluck airplanes out of the air or tear down elevated trains. He just oozes mean. I mean, he's bad. I didn't envy Carrie Fisher. As an actress, she had to figure out how to play off this undulating, massive blubber. Let me ask you something. How do you have a meaningful relationship with a 3-ton slug?
I was stuck in that crate. So yeah. Oh, well, there you go. So they stuck me in that crate with no monitor. I was just puppeteering blind, kind of knowing where he was standing. So the fact that his head wasn't, I'm proud of the fact that it didn't look that stupid. I think we literally did like 1 or 2 takes. It wasn't like, I just knew that he was going to say, "Hey, what do you think?" And I had to turn around. And so people say, because Tim Rose did him in the movie, but I said I did puppeteer him and do his voice, but in that special.
So
you did a good job too, Kurt.
That's awesome, Kirk. See, that's what I'm saying. You got to get some credit there because, we grew up just as much as the movies. We grew up on these documentaries, and honestly, to us, they're honestly just as special, if not sometimes more. Right? I know even David Bordeaux just mentioned here that the Star Wars to Jedi is what got him kind of inspired to get into this industry. I know Tom kind of said similar. So it's they're to us they're just as important. I think than the movies.
It was how we relived the movies too, because I mean that was at a time where if you wanted to buy a VHS of the movie, it was $100.
Yeah, it was more than that.
Parents weren't going to pick that up. But if you could record one of these when it aired on NBC or something like that, you could watch it over and over again. I think I got from Star Wars The Jedi off of PBS. Like, it was like maybe channel 21 or something out here in New York was running it. And they would do the commercial for the tote bags in the breaks. And I just, I captured a few of those in my recording of it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And Tony, so now we're getting into obviously the Salacious. We found some concept art that they just recently published it on StarWars.com. Great interview with you and Tom about this new replica that's coming out. Now, are those pictures that we see, and maybe Tom, because you're looking at them, are these the original, or are these the ones you guys worked?
No, these were a couple of sketches that Tony did when we just first started talking about the thing. And we were trying to work out, what's his pose going to be? What's his energy going to be like? What's the personality that's coming through? And, Tony, being the artist that he is, wanted to try and give him a little more of a wry look. I love this sketch. And, ultimately, though, we're really bound by what the prop looks like.
Right.
And this is a little more of it. He Tony was trying to find a way if we could get him looking off to the side or something, but the puppet couldn't do that. So we have to stick to the puppet because that's our goal. We want people to feel like, somebody went into the Lucasfilm archives, plucked the thing out and put it in your room, except that it's in better shape because it's not latex and 40 years old.
Yeah. So Tom, regarding kind of the kickstarting this thing, and obviously we invited our buddy Lee, who has number one of these things. Can you kind of just describe, just for people, obviously, what it takes to kind of get some of these things kickstarted and made, and
it's no small process, especially when it's a licensed piece like this. There's a lot of heavy lifting on the back end when it comes to anything that's got to go through approvals and all of that, and that goes literally from the concept to the pose to the look to the sculpt to the molds, the first shots, the paint, all of that stuff, and then safety testing and all of your marketing and blah 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 blah, lots of back end stuff. Plus you've got to get your crew paid and get all of the actual making the thing done, not just getting it approved. You got to have something to approve. In terms of this piece, Salacious was on my list. I want to say Salacious now.
I know.
It was on my list for a long time, but he wasn't where he was in the release schedule. Lee, was he would check in every month or so. I'm like, hey Tom, how about Salacious now? And I'm like, not yet. I got other stuff to. Hey, how about now? You ready now? It's just.
So now we've gone from weekly to monthly now, because I do recall
weekly, nightly.
He doesn't call you.
He doesn't after lunch. 11s.
Sunday.
Twice on Sunday, right? Yeah. And eventually it was just kind of like, all right, let's. It was after we had done the Gamorrean with Tony. So Tony had done this Gamorrean fighter for Mandalorian season 2. There it is. So that's actually the picture. That's the Favreau picture, right? Or is that ours?
That might be
the Favreau shot.
I don't know.
I think that's the Favreau shot. Anyway, I guess that's a good sign if we can't tell the difference.
Right.
But, so Tony had done that sculpt for the movie. And so with that kind of lineage, we were able to give folks something that had direct lineage to that original sculpt, kind of in that sort of same old kind of scenario there. And that was really cool. It gave us something especially with Mando being as big as it was. And there wasn't a lot of stuff like that out there for Mando. This, you got toys and things like that. But this was something that was like really from the production. It's an amazing, really cool sculpt, and it's like it was the first thing that we saw from season 2. Jon Favreau put that on his Instagram. That was literally the first thing we saw from season 2.
Yeah.
So we had just finished that, and then I kind of got thinking. I was like, well, if we're working with Tony, if you're going to do a Salacious Crumb, like that's the guy to sculpt it. And we had previous at my other studio, we had done a whole bunch of restoration with the Lucasfilm archives. And in that process, we got to spend a lot of time with Salacious. We got to do tons of reference on him. We got to take photos. We also, through Regal, go to the archives from time to time and examine stuff and do photos and measurements and scan things and blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, I thought, well, let's do the Reese's Pieces thing. Let's put our research in his sculpting and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it's not, Tony could have sculpted Salacious with his eyes closed, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
But we came in with that real solid direction of replicating the puppet and, finding a pose that had some energy and some life, but also still fit within the parameters of what the thing could do. So this is a maquette that Tony sculpted. And you know what? I'll let Tony talk a little about the maquette. They've got a picture up of the little mini one you did, Tony. You want to talk a little about making that guy?
Well, let's see if I can remember what I did with that guy. Well, based on what I got from our conversations, it sounded like you wanted something pretty close to the original, and I thought, well, it's going to help everybody if I go ahead and make this little 3-inch, 4-inch tall maquette just to work out the position of him, his pose, some of the details and so on. So, I've done that, well, quite a lot actually in the past, so it wasn't anything out of the ordinary for me. It's just a part of the process. And Tom quite liked what I came up with, so I used that as a blueprint for the big one. It went pretty well.
Nice.
Yeah, we kind of stuck pretty tightly to it. Are those BBs or ball bearings in the eyes on that maquette?
Yeah, I think it's BBs.
I love it.
Awesome. So, and Tony, by this time, I mean, you've sculpted the Salacious about 4 times, right? From my understanding.
Yes.
What 4 times have you had to do it?
Well, the original, plus I did one for Sideshow a few years back.
Yep.
That was just about my size. I did another one for Mandalorian, a puppet version. It was seen for all of 3 seconds, I think.
Yeah.
That one you did roasted?
And this one.
Yeah, the roasted one, right? He's getting roasted in the Mandalorian.
That's so cool.
I love that.
The one in the cage is watching the roasted.
Oh, the one in the cage. Oh, awesome.
It's just
Yeah, I
such
didn't do the roasted one. I have no idea.
horrible moment. Just you see one roasting, you're like, oh, this is terrible, and then it's like you see the buddy who's waiting to be next, and he's like, oh, this just got so worse. Like how?
So that's awesome. So then you and Tom kind of just started working on obviously the full size at that point, right after that the maquette.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I had pitched to Tony the idea of doing that stone block base. We wanted to make sure that we were doing something that was unique from the Sideshow version. So Tony's Sideshow one came out in, I think it was 2007, 2008. It's been a long time since that's been done. And the sculpt on that was amazing, and it was a really great interpretation of the character. Scale wise, it was a little small. And it was looser in terms of how it was going to, how it reflected the puppet. And that was, that's kind of Sideshow's thing. They want to make a cool version of a character. So it's more of a statue versus a prop replica. And it's funny. That's certainly the more fun job. That's certainly the easier way to do things. But for us, we wanted to make sure we were getting the hair right. We wanted to make sure we were getting the proportions right, the wrinkles on the neck, all of that stuff. And Tony and I went back and forth during the sculpting process a fair bit. Most of the time it would just be we'd chat a bit, and then we'd sort of. He'd send some photos over, and I'd look at them, and Rob at the shop or our Lucasfilm rep would look at them, and then maybe our Lucas rep had a note, maybe we had a note. We tell that to Tony. He'd go like, usually it would just be like, okay, I see it, yeah, no problem. And the next round, it just slowly pushed closer and closer to that real puppet.
So how many hours was that? Sorry, Gabe. How many hours did that take to sculpt that to come from concept to?
That's a good question for Tony. It was quite a
Tony,
while.
Yeah, Tony. Lee's asking how long approximately, like just the amount of time that went into sculpting the full size one.
As I recall, it was a few months. I think like 5 or 6, all told. And I had time off from Mandalorian, so I had the time to do it. It was very convenient the way it worked out.
Oh, perfect. See, it was just everything aligning. And I wanted to ask you something. There, obviously, the neck is something that's very, particular about this character. Tony, can you tell us kind of how you created the neck on the original puppet, which now became obviously iconic the way the neck looks?
As I recall, and I'm not sure how accurate this recollection is, but as I recall, it was basically a fabric sleeve. And then I covered that fabric sleeve with a little bit of foam to give it some shape. And I put pieces of latex skin over that. And that latex skin was I got that by crumpling up some tin foil and then flattening it out again. So it was nice and flat on a piece of clay. And then I made a plaster mold up for that. And I painted latex into that plaster mold to make the skin pieces.
Yeah.
And then I glued those onto the neck sleeve. So that's my recollection of how that's done.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. The tinfoil is what I heard.
It's clever. It's a good trick. So Kirk, you know how this stuff goes together. My favorite thing about this sculpt, and it's one thing to sculpt this head because the head was a sculpted piece. It's another thing to sculpt that neck and the body and those arms and make it look like you just put latex onto a bit of tinfoil and then put it on the thing. Like the details Tony did on this thing, to me, that's the most challenging thing out of all of this. He managed to make it look fabricated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he's amazing. I mean, he also, the arms and legs are just wooden dowels that he sculpted some foam over and then covered with. It was really fast. And I don't know, did you learn that? It was sort of a stop motion technique, but I know they used it a lot on on Dark Crystal too. Tony.
Yeah, they did. It's true. It's an old fabrication technique. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, in fact, we had sheets. We had like 3x2 plaster molds of like 4 or 5 different skins textures. One of which I remember we molded from the pebble stone steps outside of one of the Kerner buildings. We just went there with some alginate and a little tray and poured it on it, and then flipped it and made a mold out of it. And we would make a lot of the creatures' skins from essentially the pebble stone paving stones.
That's awesome. Yeah, we did something similar on the base to this. We often will pull texture stamps off of the walls in the studio and stuff, and we had a section where there was just an old concrete block that had broken away. And so, you take even just a little broken section, you're like, all right, we'll do some silicone on this one and a little over there. So we've got all these different texture stamps in the shop, and a lot of them just came off the walls because it's like you just see something. Sometimes it's a piece of fruit, sometimes it's a thing on the wall, and you're just like, oh, mold that quick.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
A lot of what we would walk around see an interesting bit of pavement or wall texture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Tom, I guess I don't know if it'd be a question for you or for Tony. The glass eyes. I mean, obviously, I could see that being a very difficult process in a hard, statue.
It is,
but you managed it.
Yeah. So we got to see the real puppet up close. I mean, the eyes are fairly standard glass taxidermy eyes. They're the thick glass with paint on the back. They've got that depth to them and stuff like that. There's some overspray in them. We have a company we've worked with for years on glass eyes that did these for us, and so we did a few sets, and I think it's either 1 or 2 pair to Tony once we knew the size of them from the archives, so that when he was doing the clay sculpt, you could see the eyes in there. I feel like it helps with approvals, and it helps with folks that maybe don't visualize as much along the way. To have the real eyes in the sculpt, it makes the thing pop and it just looks more alive. So we did that on the sculpt, and then Tony did his original molds. We got the mold masters, and then we had to basically engineer that for things like the removable arms with the pegs that we've got. Tony had it keyed, which was great for just assembly, but we needed something that was kind of customer friendly for the way the arms peg in. We also engineered how the legs and the tail peg in, which they have a screw and a little washer and a wing nut on the inside. You can take his bottom off. And same for the ears. The ears peg in now. Tony keyed them, but we just added these little pegs and stuff so that we could ship them with the ears off, the arms off, the legs off, the tail. And if somebody didn't have room for the tail, wherever they were putting them, they could leave the tail off, that kind of thing.
Talking of that, how long did that take for them to pack one of those, Tom? Because it took me about an hour to unpack it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny. People don't think about people think, oh, the cost of packing is whatever. But we had 2 people from the shop, and they managed to pack 3 of them in one day. So, I mean,
wow.
Just as a cost, that's not insignificant, especially in New York. But those, so these original 6, it started with Lee's, insistence.
Constant
and then I said, okay, if we're gonna do this, I think you might have actually talked to a few people that then asked me. They're like, oh, I heard about this thing. Can I get in on? And these are all longtime customers. Gabe being one of them, and some of the Rogue One 6 guys. And we, so I put together the first 6. And initially I thought it was going to be, okay, well, you guys commissioned it, and then we'll put it up for sale, and then we'll do them all at the same time. And, what we tried on this one, and it's something we haven't done before, is I said, all right, well, I've got these 6 kind of like pre-orders here. What if we make them at the same time that we do our paint masters? What if we make them, and it's the same people that paint the paint masters that paint the production ones for us. We do this, the finish work on every one of these is done by the team I've got in New York. So what if we put them in your hands and then put them up for sale? Because usually you guys put your videos out there and it's 8 months after the thing is sold out and everybody looks at it and goes, oh, that's an amazing Rancor. Where can I get it? And it's like, you can't, it's sold out. So
that's true.
Now we've got people have a chance to see. Gabe did a great review the other day. The Rogue One 6 guys did a couple reviews. People are seeing this thing. They're seeing how it pegs together. They're seeing the skin up close. Tony's amazing sculpt. The pretty good paint that some of us did in New York. It's the sort of thing where you get they're getting a straight 1-to-1 look at what is going up for sale on Tuesday. That I think is really cool. It might be something we'll do again on a future thing. I guess we'll see how this one goes.
Yeah.
And yes, there's the plaque.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. It's a
signature edition.
It's a dual signature.
Tony McVeigh, the sculptor, and Tim Rose, the performer. It's I'm humbled that we get to work with folks like Tony. I was super grateful that Tim was excited about it too and wanted to. He said, "Oh, Tim, by the way, Tony, I think I might have sent you an email with his quote, but Tim was effusive about the sculpt. He was very, very happy with what you did."
Oh, really? Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah. I guess he knows that thing inside and out.
Literally.
Thank you for the rim check, Kirk. Thank you. Yes. He's always got your back.
I know.
But yeah, and so that was a little look at the base texture and stuff too. The base was sculpted by Patrick Louie, who's been working with me in New York for about 10 years now. He actually started as an intern in college. He came in, he didn't have much of a portfolio. He had a couple of pictures on like a flip phone, but we had a good vibe about him. He seemed like a good kid, and the work was bloody and disgusting. It was like real like gruesome horror stuff. But we brought him in, and he's a super talented artist. He can do anything you throw at him. And this was one of those where it was like, I want the base to look like this. I showed him some pictures of Jabba's dais. And he took it start to finish. It started as fabricated foam. Then he sculpted texture over top. Then we did a very quick mold to make the master. and then did all the paint and everything. And he hand sculpted in Jabba's tattoo as an emblem on the front of the base, just to give it some other little bit of interest. And I cut up the first, patterned out the 2 leather pieces with Rob. Actually, Rob did the cutting. I just kept coming in and going, no, take a little off of here. I'll just take the credit on the next podcast. But it was, I went, I don't know about anybody else, but like the best part of my job is when I can go shopping every once in a while. I don't get to do it often anymore, but I had a Saturday. I went to the big fabric store up a few towns away, and I just went through all the aisles, and I'm like, okay, suedes and leathers and all of this stuff and all these different cool materials. And, you're layering them. You're like this one and this one, or this one and this one. I bought a yard of each from like 4 or 5 different fabrics, and we tried them all. And then we figured out like 2 that just had this cool kind of blend. Rob cut the patterns. I did the little distressing paint on them. And there we go. It gave him, he's got like his own little throne now.
Yeah.
It's a nice touch. It really is.
Yeah. And speaking of the Jabba tattoo, Kirk or Tony, do you guys remember anything regarding that? Was that like a George decision, or was that already in the sculpt? Or
I don't.
I don't remember anything about that tattoo whatsoever.
That was probably John Coppinger, right, over in England, was sculpting the full size Jabba. With
he was
all maybe. Yeah,
he was all done in England. We just did. I molded a little. Phil Tippett did a little sculpey thing like this, really, maybe 10 inches. And we molded that and cast it up in resin, and Phil painted it, and we sent it off to England. So it took something the size of, your shoe and made it whatever.
So we did a replica of that.
Right.
That I love that concept model. It's one of my favorite little sculpts. Is Gabe pulling one out of the rafters there?
I'm getting it.
So we did a sculpt. There's only about 10 of them left, I think. If anybody is interested in, hold on, I got to go into like sales guy mode. Otherwise, they'll kill me at the shop. But yeah, there's about 10 of these left. And we digitally recreated that based on tons of photos that we took of the real one at the archives. It's actually was on display at the main house in the ranch for a long time. And right down to the jugs and all of that stuff.
So we molded that as a one piece. I think it was a silicone mold or a urethane mold, but it was flexible. And then I think we cast up 2 or 3, one for George, one to go to England, and one to stay at ILM.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. He had a big scrotum for the back of his head.
That's right.
100%. That's what my wife says every time. She's like, I don't like that guy. It just looks like one giant ball.
So that was an addition of about 250 pieces, and I think there's 10. It's like 10 or 12 left right now on the site. So that's definitely not one to wait on if anybody's been thinking about it. And Kirk said that's it. So I mean, that means it's right.
Oh yeah, I'm molded.
That's great that you made that mold though, because I've heard of, I've seen it forever, and I know there was one in England, and I know there's definitely the one that George had, and Phil had kept one, so maybe Phil had the one that was at ILM.
Maybe that's the third one. Yeah.
But it's just I knew somebody had I think the one at the ranch is actually the original with the wood base, the actual wood base.
Yeah, the Sculpey that he did, yeah.
And the one Phil had, it was definitely cast. So it was like I always knew someone made a mold of that, and now I know who. So thanks.
Well, speaking of maquettes, and we'll go back to the Salacious in a little bit. But actually, before we move on, Tom, this Salacious goes on sale this Tuesday, right?
This Tuesday, 12 p.m. So 12 noon Eastern time. It'll go up on regalrobot.com. There'll be a picture of him right on the front page. So in fact, if you go there right now, there's already a picture of him on the front page, and you click on that, and then you can see more pictures of him. You can see pictures, real close-up looks at him, at the base, all the details, the glass eyes, the real fur, all of that fun stuff, or the real fake fur, I should say.
How many is the run?
Only 150. Oh. So real small, which
6,
for us is a huge run. We're usually like 75, 80 pieces. We thought about doing 83 of them, to kind of play off the year it was made. But Lucasfilm was keen to increase the size. We don't want to leave people out in the cold. I feel like so many of the latest things we've been doing, they sell out so fast. My goal with all this stuff is like, I'd love it to be on the site for a week or two. I like that it sells, but I really want people to not be, we had people on the last thing we did, those chess figures that were, it was in their cart and they were typing their credit card information in and it sold out, So I'm hopeful that with an additional 150, we can get this to where, it's around at least a couple of weeks and people can actually have a good chance to buy them. The other thing we did on this to make them as accessible as possible, because, the way that we do stuff, it's all a lot of hand painting. It's all hand cast. There's a ton of pieces on him to deal with. The price is $39.99, and that's every one of these comes with the dual signature plaque, a COA, all officially Lucasfilm approved and licensed, yada yada yada. But we have done the longest payment plan we've ever done on the site. We're doing a 12-month payment plan for him. And those plans actually, on our end, they add a bit of cost. They definitely add a whole bunch of time for Tracy and Christine and Katie at the shop and Eric. So, thank them for the plan, not me, because I just have to say like, hey guys, could we pull off a 12-month plan? And then they all go like, no. And I go, okay, we'll try it, So this is an experiment. We'll see how the plan goes. Hopefully it works well on our end and it doesn't add too much cost, and we can maybe look at longer plans on some future stuff. But
do you really think this is going to stay on the store for 2 weeks, Tom?
I mean, I kind of hope. I do think. But
well, at $39.99, now the decimal, you gotta watch.
Yeah,
that
right.
Yeah. Watch that decimal, Tom.
Could you imagine? Yeah. It's $40, and it arrives, and it's this big.
Not on the web.
When are these going to be available to ship?
So we're saying, and the now that we have that 12-month plan, I'm thinking early summer through fall of next year will be when they ship. And in the early summer, we'll start selling out anybody who paid in full. And as the plans start ticking off, we'll start going through the rest. Usually we ship them out in number order, and we'll probably still do the same, but kind of almost in two groups, where it's the number order of the people who paid in full, and then from there, as soon as the plans kick over, we'll also put it out there that if anybody wants to pay off their plan early, which you can do with the partially plans we use. That they could do that, and then if theirs was the next number up, we would ship it out. That's Maria. She did some of the engineering on the connections. She helped work on refining the paint master and the mold master with me. Max at the shop worked on the paint master with me. Marcus worked on engineering the eyes so that we could do something where it was a repeatable thing that we could get those glass eyes in. It's a good group, and Maria will probably be heading up the group that's painting all the final ones when the time comes around.
So how did you get those eyes in? You gonna reveal that?
Weird, I didn't mention that. So anyway, other cool things about this are when you go to the site on the 24th. But do go to the site and check it out, and then put a thing on your calendar on the 24th at noon to go back to the site and buy one, because they are pretty cool.
As avid collectors, cool. I would actually not take Tom's advice to go back at noon. I would actually go back maybe about 15 minutes before and be ready right at noon. Get it all set up, because you just never know. You never know.
Somebody asked us about that. They were like, it was somebody who had gotten blocked out of the chess set. Yeah. And they were like, I don't know how these people are doing it. And the only thing I could say is set up autofill on your browser, where it's automatically, it's got your address. Set your credit card up that way too, so that when you're punching this thing in, and if you plan on using the payment plan, you can set up an account with Partially ahead of time, register your card and everything. And that way, when it comes to the Partially side of the checkout, you can just literally type in your email and password And you should be through a lot faster than if you had to go in and register and put all your information in.
Yeah.
Well, now you just guaranteed it won't be up there for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know.
Well, but so guys, obviously, this thing comes out Tuesday, like Tom said, 12 Eastern time, 9 Pacific time.
That's right.
Yeah, trust me, you don't want to miss this one. You got to jump on, fill out everything.
So, I mean, Gabe's got one behind him. I see Lee's got his in the picture. Kirk's is somewhere out in space.
I want to say no, and really, Tom. I mean, obviously, we got Tom here. We got Tony here. Obviously, I mean, really phenomenal job. This is just amazing, and it's actually such a pleasure and such an honor to be able to tell Tony himself that this thing looks amazing. And I mean, I could not believe it. I walk in here and this thing stares back at me, and it literally, like, it gives me the creeps sometimes because it's just so realistic looking and so cool. Just really great job, guys.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So Tony, I wanted to ask you one more thing, because we brought up maquettes. You worked on the Mandalorian, and it took me a long time to find this because our buddy Lee is like the biggest fan of the little baby Yoda creature. And you actually sculpted the maquette for the baby Yoda, correct?
That's right, I did, yeah.
Yeah, and I happened to find a little picture. Can you give us a little information about kind of that process and what you did for that sculpt?
Well, let's see. Christian Altman designed the character. He's one of the illustrators, designers in the art department there. Yep. And Doug came to me and said, we want to get a little maquette of this thing so we can do a couple of castings. You paint one up and we'll send it down south to LA to use or act as a reference for the puppet. So, it was just one of many things I was doing at the time. I didn't give it much thought. I just copied Christian's artwork, made a few minor changes in the expression, made a mold and cast it and painted one up, and it went down south. And then I moved on to the next thing. I didn't really think any more about it. No one had any idea it was going to get as much attention as it eventually did.
Yeah.
So it was a complete surprise.
And that's, I mean, I'm telling you. Oh,
there's the Christian Altman art.
There you go.
The
Lee's
sketch.
got the original art. Let me put it up here.
That's where he took that from.
And look at that. Yeah, you got it. I mean, it's right on.
That's why they hire him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
It's almost like that's his job.
Yeah, right.
Good at
that. And yeah, Tony, I know obviously you just mentioned you're really surprised, but yeah, I mean, this baby Yoda just kind of took off, right? It just took over the world, really. Yeah. I mean, there's songs, toys. I mean, my kids have at least a dozen stuffed animals. Yeah, more than that. Like Lee probably has more than that in stuffed animals.
Oh no! I buy them and I give them to my friends' kids. That's
I sure you do.
Right. Whatever you have to tell the guy at Target, no worries.
Yeah. So moving on from Star Wars really quick. I mean, obviously we have to talk about some of these other projects. Now, both Kirk, you and Tony, right, worked on Gremlins.
Yeah. We went with Chris. Like I said, Chris Wallace left ILM and started his own shop, and probably 6 months after Jedi Wrap for us, he started up on Gremlins.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. I don't know that there's been a time. Let's see, going back to about 2006, there has not been a time where we have not had a gremlin in our studio for repair, either from the first film or the second film. In fact, right now, we just wrapped up work on one. Lainey Miller, who is Dick Miller's widow, had a gremlin from Gremlins 2 that Joe Dante gave her. And she sent it to us to refurbish for her and to restore it and put an armature in it and stuff like that so it could be on display again. And we just finished that one up. But it's always, every time you look in our studio, there's almost always a gremlin if you come through.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And Kirk, you did the storyboard, right, for that final
Yeah, I did a bunch. I set up the paint shop and the mold shop for Chris. I designed the paint job for the Gremlins. We did 3 different looks. What you see in the movie, and then something was a little more like a coral snake, kind of orangey red and black and yellow, and then a real wild one, which was very yellow and ochres and golds and green. It was more of like a green lizard iguana thing. And they went with more of the subdued thing. And so I painted probably a good 50 of them. And then I painted I made all their eyes. We just took hemispheres, acrylic hemispheres, and I, again, designed 3 or 4 different eyes, not too far away from what they ended up, but, just trying different things. And back in the day, because you were the factory, that you didn't send them out, you had to figure out the process. So it was like, paint the iris, then paint the back, and scratch the veins in, and then do the final coat. So I did a lot of painting on that, and then some puppeteering on set. And yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's a cool approach on that too, though. So it's it was the black iris, then the yellow, and then scratching in the veins, and then the red was the last pass.
Yeah, and exactly. I made a little vacuum formed slit for the eye, so they'd match. You could just
nice.
Pop it in, spray it with the airbrush, do the next one, just do all the irises first, and then you'd paint it yellow or that yellow gold, and you wouldn't fill it all the way because you wanted bloodshot.
You needed the rim.
And then it was scratched out around to make the I don't know what you call that stuff, the fibery looking stuff around the eyeball, and then paint it like a kind of a rare. It's really a vermilion, really. And then so I probably spent 2 days just painting eyeballs.
Those are awesome, man.
And Tony, I have a picture up on here that has you with one of the Gremlins. What part did you take in kind of working on those?
Well, Chris hired me to sculpt the Gremlin. So based on his maquette, he made a little, 6-8 inch tall maquette of the thing. So I used that as a reference, and I sculpted the big one, the final size one. I think Chris got a little panicky because I was taking too long to sculpt it. So he got on one leg, and Randy Dutra got on the other one while I was still finishing up the body and the arms and stuff. So between us, we got that thing finished. It was molded in silicone, and then I think maybe plaster too. They did a whole bunch of different body parts and so on in silicone and make molds off of those. For the latex versions, and I also did some 3 or 4 mogwai faces with different expressions. A sad one, a surprised one, a horrified one, that kind of stuff. So I did a little bit here and there. I wasn't on that film for very long, like maybe 3 months.
There was only one Gremlin sculpt, and that's the one you're looking at in the photo. There weren't multiple Gremlins.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there was just one. We would paint them a little different, or then modify the bodies, just usually because of the mechanics. And so, just again, the factory was just probably 3 of us molding, casting, and painting. So over time, the molds probably got a little funky. I think there were.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think at the end of the movie there were probably 120 Gremlins that were made. Some of them were just stuffies on the top of a helmet for the.
I think by the time you get to 120, it's basically just like the mold is so worn out, everything just looks like a marshmallow.
Yeah, we had. That's why we made the silicone master so we could pull fresh molds because you're baking for the faces. A lot of them were baked in foam latex, and so you can only use those molds about 12 times, and then they just turn it up. So.
Yeah.
We ran into that with our production stuff. I mean, even on resin things, you've got to, it's every 25, 30 castings on something with a lot of detail. You've still got to make new molds. I love the face sculpt you did on the Gremlins 1 Gremlin there, Tony. There's just those deep, deep recesses and the real popped brow. Like it's purely evil looking, but it's got a lot of pop. It reminds me of, like something like a Blaine Gibson or something like that Disneyland. You look at it and you get a read on it like that,
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good to hear. Thanks, I appreciate that.
That's good.
Well, I give Chris credit too for designing something that didn't look like anything that came before, And he knew Tony was an amazing sculptor. So it's such a great team because Chris's designs, I mean, for years, I would say he's one of the few creature guys that designed creatures that didn't look like, oh, it's a gorilla with scales, or it's a, it's the alien, but it's got eyeballs down its chin or whatever. It really was a unique design. And then Tony's sculpts, if you haven't noticed by now, have so much personality to them.
For sure.
The combo, I still just think it's one of the best creature designs in our generation.
It's awesome. And thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Tom, I want to bring up, because we got Kirk here, and you recently posted a picture on your Tom Spina designs of this costume, which
does that bring back bad memories for you, Kirk?
So
great memories.
So
you'd never know looking at this guy in this captain's hat who this guy really was.
Hold on, I got it for you guys. So
let's
hold on. Let's watch this.
Oh, geez.
Say goodnight.
Everyone clap.
The applause. So good.
What are you guys looking at?
So
Sorry,
Tony.
Tell Tony what's going on.
I know. So Tony, we were looking at the scene from Star Trek Part 3, right? Part 4, where Kurt gets the Vulcan sleeper choke, right?
Here's
right, yeah.
Here's a
I remember that. Oh yeah.
There's a deep Star Wars cut. If you roll back a little bit, there's a gal in a red beret, and she was one of the Creature Shop people, Jeannie Loren, who worked at the Creature Shop. Let's see. She's sitting on the right side of the bus, looking towards the front. She's wearing a beret. Right there. A red beret. That's Jeannie Loren. She, also did acting, but she was one of the main fabricators on Jedi.
Oh, that is awesome.
Small world kind of deep cut.
Yeah.
Hey, Kurt, I don't know if you're familiar with, we've got this thing going with Star Wars, Star Trek, and we just love Star Trek on Collection Wars. And I just want to know what it feels like to be able to shoot the bird to Captain Kirk and Spock. How did it feel, man? I just would love that opportunity.
What's funny was they weren't even there because the bus was so small, the camera and lights. So I'm flipping off, a camera guy.
That's hilarious.
So Kirk, and I'm sorry. So Kirk, before we get into the costume, this isn't the only time. This is another deep cut that people might not realize. You were also in the new Spider-Man movies as that character, right?
That is Kevin Feige's all his thing. He's like, I was pitching a thing to Marvel, and he was saying, I don't look that bad in real life, but I tried to look as and they were shooting Spider-Man, and he and I were having a meeting, and he was late because he had a flat tire or something. So he comes in kind of like, hey, sorry, I'm late. I can't really hang. I got to go. I said, oh, where are you going? He said, I'm going to New York. I said, I'm going to New York on Friday. And this was a Wednesday. He said, I said, where are you going to New York for? He's like, we're shooting the last few scenes of the Spider-Man movie. We're shooting in a location in Queens. I said, oh, cool. He said, when are you going? I said, I'm on Friday. He goes, and he literally in the room, he goes, oh my God, we should put you in the movie. You could be the punk on the street, and you can flip off Spider-Man, or you can be the boombox. And I said, well, I'm not going to get the mohawk. And he goes, no, you just go like you are. It's like 30 years later. And he kind of pitched it. And I went, okay.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. If you want to do it, I said, yeah. And Kevin is a huge Star Trek fan. In fact, the reason I'm friends with him is I met him at a Comic-Con party through a mutual friend, the composer Michael Giacchino. And Michael introduced me, he said, oh, this is Kirk Thatcher. And Kevin, so he's introduced me to like 10 of the Marvel guys, and Kevin's standing there, and he literally goes, "Wait, V. Kirk Thatcher, like Kirk Thatcher from Star Trek 4 was a punk and played the song and like kind of named because my resume." And I thought Michael was punking me. I went, "Wait, yeah," and he comes up to me. I swear to God, shakes my hand and goes, "Thank you. It's such a pleasure to meet you. You're the reason I got into the film business."
Oh, wow. That is awesome.
Well, thank you for reinvigorating.
Basically, we owe the Marvel universe to you.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you know, he worked on the X-Men movies. He worked his way up to running it. He worked on the X-Men movies with Ralph Winter and all that. But he said the reason I got into the filmmaking was I saw Star Trek 4 like 14 or 15, and I saw your credit. You were an associate producer, and you were the punk, and you wrote the song. And
yeah,
and, he said, I want to be a producer if you get to do all that cool stuff. So
yeah. Well,
we've been friends ever since.
So speaking of, so that the song you hear in the boombox, right, Kurt? You wrote it, right? Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, really quick. I wrote and sang it. So Leonard, we just shot the scene, and I'm just, well, I guess it's this hand. Let me get over there. Get it accurate for you guys. So I was like this, and there was no music because they couldn't rap over. You know, you screw up your audio. So I was just bopping around, hitting the chew gum, looking, you know, like an asshole. So I was just bopping with kind of a da 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 because I was a fan of punk rock.
Yes.
And so we shot, and they were going to put music to it, and the music guy at Paramount was like, "Well, we have Duran Duran, or we have, you know, like British Dave." Yeah. I said, no. And Leonard didn't know about, you know, this kind of music. I said, no, Leonard, that's not right. It's got to be really angry punk music, like Sex Pistols or Dead Kennedys. And I remember the music, you know, guy at Paramount kind of made a face like, oh no, we're not going to use that. And so this is how great Leonard was with me. I said, look, I will write. I was in a band in high school. I will write a punk song. And if you don't like it, don't use it. But I can write one really fast. This was like, say, Wednesday or Thursday. And so I literally wrote in about 20 minutes the lyrics and kind of the rhythm. And Mark Mangini, who was the sound designer on Trek 4, I met on Gremlins because I did some live Gremlin voices on Gremlins 1, which ended up, Mark hired me on Gremlins 2 to do voices. But I said, I knew he played guitar. I said, look, I wrote this punk song, but, you know, I don't play an instrument. So he said, cool. So we recorded it in the sound in his office with, we wanted a crappy mic because real homegrown punk was not, you know, done in studios. So we recorded it in the hallway to sound really bad. And he played guitar, and one of the sound editors played drums, and another one played bass. And we recorded it in about an hour. And Leonard came by the next day. So I think it was a Friday or Saturday because he was there to listen to the whale sounds, or the alien versions of whale sounds. Are we getting a bad echo?
No.
Sorry. And so he listened to that, and I said, okay, hey, I want to play the song for you. And, you know, it's only like a minute and a half. So I remember him listening to it, very serious. And it's over, and he looks at me and goes, it's awful. Like, oh, no. He goes, so it's perfect. We cracked a big joke. And I was like, seriously? He's like, yeah, it's perfect. It's horrible. It's perfect. So, and I Say Screw You was in there exactly before that moment when I put them off.
So I'm going to play a little bit of it.
Kudos to the editing on that. You know, that's just chef's kiss, you know?
It's right down Gabe's alley.
Yeah.
It's awful. I wish I could take it.
I know.
Yeah, it's basically a song you want to slap somebody for listening to. That was
No,
I love how big your move is on the turn up too, on the volume. So it's just, you know?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. One more anecdote. I know we got to go. The jacket I was wearing, I bought on Melrose as a cheap black leather jacket, but it was really stiff because it was cheap leather. So, and I'm wearing a dog collar. So when Leonard, the first time he went to pinch me, I didn't feel it. So I'm, sitting there. Wait, let me get it right. I'm sitting there like this and trying not to look at him because the whole idea is I'm looking away. So, so I'm doing this and I can't, I can see peripherally his arm is there. So the first take, I'm like trying to, and I said, Leonard, you really got to pinch me. And what the joke was, he said, well, you're supposed to act like I'm pinching you. I'm like, I can't feel when you're actually touching my, my jacket. So we had to do, but we literally did it going up and down the Golden Gate Bridge. There was no,
really?
We were literally on the bridge. So for all that, not just the whole thing. So we were on that bridge for like 4 hours going up and back because you had to match the background. So we shooting going north and then take a break as we go south and then shoot going north and then change angles and then shoot going north and then drive back. So
how much was that in tolls?
I know, right?
Yeah.
So Tom, how did you get this? How did this come through your shop?
So, well, we do a ton of this sort of work where someone has a piece from a movie, costume, whatever. The example I usually give is like, someone who's got Arnold Schwarzenegger's costume from Terminator. You just can't put it on a regular mannequin. In this rare instance, it was actually my own piece that we were doing. It's usually, unlike the cobbler's kid that has no shoes, I have there's usually a couple of costumes that I have on a hanger because I spent all my time making mannequins for other people. But this was a mannequin I put together for that costume. Very minimal, no hands, very clean and simple. At the time, I had a few of these costumes from that movie kind of all together. And this came through a trade with a fellow collector, someone I've known for many years. And it eventually wound up getting traded somewhere else. You know how collectors are. Things come in, things go out. But yeah, we kind of like the Gremlins. There's always a couple of mannequins being built. At the moment, there's a bunch of Power Rangers in the shop. There's a couple of Ninja Turtles stuff where it's sometimes it's that combination where you have something like a Ninja Turtle where it's a big foam latex suit that is now like a graham cracker suit. That we have to figure out, like, how do we preserve this and actually conserve that costume, but also get it onto a mannequin so it looks pretty good because it's been sitting in a box for 20 years.
Is that the one from the 90s? Is that the Ninja Turtles from the 90s?
Yes. Yeah. Like actual the handsome chopped turtles. Yeah, they're incredible. We've had a few of them through. They're beautiful costumes. They're really neat the way they've engineered them too. With there's like cool lacing and stuff that goes on underneath all the pads and things like that. But it's foam latex, so it's tough to work with after that much time.
When are we going to do the baby dinosaur?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
We've had one or two baby dinosaurs through for little work, but yeah, I mean, I would love to help preserve some more of those. We did a bunch of Henson stuff for the Museum of the Moving Image when they got their exhibit going. So a lot of Dark Crystal stuff. Jim Henson's Skeksis, the one that Jim actually performed, came through for conservation. One of the Mystics came through for restoration conservation. We patched up all the hands, preserved those, refurbished the head and preserved that. Podling, so one of those little cannonball guys from Labyrinth. So a whole bunch of other stuff came through from that. Some other Mystic hands and Skeksis hands too. But I'm like the luckiest kid in the world. I go to work and all the stuff that inspired me is right there in front of me. And then we're, on that's one side of it. And then on the other side, I get to make cool Star Wars stuff for people. Yeah. And it's just kind of like, never not excited to go to the studio.
Yeah.
Never. Every day is just like, okay, when can I go? I'm going to work now. You know.
Hey, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to give props out to Gabe for putting together such awesome content for these wonderful, talented artists on our show. He's done he's done a fantastic job, Gabe, my partner. Dude, you're awesome. If this is Michael Tony talking on Collection Wars. I have a quick question I wanted to ask you. First, I wanted to let you guys know, Kurt, and as well as Tony. So I'm 51 years old now, and when I was 18, right out of high school, I left Texas and went up to California, and I was lucky enough. I snuck on a few lots and, got to meet some cool people, and I worked for a model shop called Landmark Entertainment Group. I don't know if any of you, if you're familiar with that company, but anyways, right past that, I decided to come back to Texas, but yet, the heart of what I wanted to do, and Tom might not even know this, was to be a part of the creature shop, work in the model shop. And, so I thought it would be smart to jump on an airplane and fly to San Rafael, California. This is 6 years after Jedi. And like so many passionate, now collectors or enthusiasts of Star Wars, I wanted to be a part of Lucasfilm so much. And when I went in to try to get on there, through the security tower, my whole deal was I had fibbed to him a little bit that I had an internship interview with the model shop in the creature effects shop, and they looked on their little board and looking down, and they couldn't find my name. I don't know why, except for the fact that I wasn't on there. But I ended up getting arrested that afternoon at Skywalker Ranch. And but all kidding aside, Tony, I want to know. You were relatively new in the industry. I know that was you had gotten a lot of from where you were from, and then being able to come over and work on a film like Return of the Jedi, and being able to meet these incredible artists. What was it like to be a part of Return of the Jedi? Go through all of the things that you guys went through, and then to be able to sit in a movie theater for the first time and watch it. What was that like for you, Tony?
At the time that I was doing it, I don't think I really appreciated what I was into there, what was going on. I mean, it was certainly novel and very interesting and challenging, but you don't really appreciate these things until way after the fact, and you can look back on it and see just how important it was in some ways to a whole bunch of different people, and how influential it was, and what a landmark it was. And I've only recently, to be honest with you, come to appreciate what an event it was to work on that movie. Right. I wasn't really that aware of it at the time, and I was kind of involved in trying to promote my career and see what was next.
Yeah.
So this kind of stuff comes to over time. And looking back on it, I can see it was a very unique experience. I'm really honored to have been a part of it.
Yeah, you can tell you're very humble. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so Kirk, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to say Kirk was a little younger on that movie.
Yeah.
Did that bring some extra enthusiasm when you saw it in the theaters?
Well, Star Wars hit me between the eyes at 15, and I said, I'd already wanted to make monsters and movies, and so I went, I want to do that. And then I met Joe, which was, incredibly lucky. Yeah. So I kind of knew I was, I used to joke I would have paid them if they'd let me. I knew what I was working on, and to me, my personality, if you can't tell, is I'm fairly garrulous, and I'm an enthusiast, which
that's awesome.
I go into something going, this is cool, and so what I did I ran around meeting everybody. It wasn't just I met Sid Ganis, who ended up running Paramount when I was there. I met Bob Beecher, who became the COO of Henson when I was there. So you meet these people who end up, especially I worked on, Tony and I worked on the biggest movie that year that was made in terms of budget and in terms of what it made. Okay. And so, and then just being an ILM, I worked on that, and E.T. and Poltergeist and Star Trek 2 and 3, and it just you get to. I said the first 10 years of my career way outshadow the next 30 years of my career. In that, it was the 80s, and they were just making movies like that, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, then it kind of moved into CG in the 90s, which wasn't my thing. But I was really like grateful and aware and super excited to the point of, I mean, Tony can probably speak to this, the point of being annoying. I was just so giggly all the time. And you know, and Tony was.
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah, okay.
It was Ken. So when I first left ILM after like whatever, almost 2 years, to go work at Gremlins, they would do these like going away cards that everyone signed, and I still have mine. Ken Ralston drew it, and it's me in my Greek fisherman's hat, which you can see in those documentary things.
Yeah,
it's got this big idiotic grin like this, and I'm covered in plaster and latex and goo, and it just says "So long, goof," and I was just this big goofy guy who was, you know, just super happy all the time. So I appreciated it then. I appreciate it now. You know, it's luck and also knowing what you want to do when you're 10 years old. But I mean, besides the job, it was the relationship. I mean, Tony and I have been friends for 40 years.
Awesome.
You know, Phil Tippett, Joe Johnson. I mean, Joe Johnson I've been friends with for like 45 years. I mean, and just having friends like that, not even the work thing, just people who are so talented and so generous with their knowledge. You know, nobody's ever like, screw off, kid, I'm a genius. Everyone's like, really, you like what I do? Thank you. You know, what do you want to know? I think that's all true artists, except Carlo Rambaldi are
Whoops.
There's Carlo stories. He wasn't a monster. I was just saying he tended to be a little more secretive. I don't want to give any. Yeah, it's an ILM back then was, like I said, it was like a fraternity of artists. And it would just, I mean, if you look at the movies made from 1980 to 1990, it's just crazy how much IP was, you know, original design, like Gremlins and Aliens was a little early, but specifically ILM, so much cool stuff came out of there. It was just great. It's like, in fact, this October they're having the second of these 3 ILM reunions for anyone who worked on the first trilogy. We did one 4 years ago. It was, so the idea was every 40 years. Yeah, so 77. So 2017 was for Star Wars. 2019 was supposed to be for
Empire,
but COVID and everything came in, and so it got bumped to now 2021. So we're doing that one. I don't know if they're going to do the Jedi reunion in 2 years, but also, you know, I was the youngest guy there. I'm 60 in 9 months, so a lot of those guys are leaving this plane of existence, which is sad. So it's really great to get together and see. Some of them I haven't literally seen in 35, 37 years. Yeah. And so it's like being part of a cool fraternity that at the time, and I think to what Tony's saying, I was enthusiastic because of my youth, but also you're always focused on your next job.
Yeah.
You know, I can go, hey, everybody, I worked on Revenge of the Jedi. Come and meet. You know, no one was doing autographs or anything now.
Yeah.
And so you're just so focused on how am I going to pay my mortgage, or
you got to hustle.
Yeah, and you don't know how good a thing. I mean, you'll work on a movie and it's 2 years later when it comes out, so you don't know if it's going to be a hit. I worked on E.T. I painted E.T.'s arms and hands and some extra skins. Wow. And I went back to ILM and I said, "Oh my God, Spielberg's making the worst movie ever." When I went in there, it's E.T. just standing there with his mouth open, and it's a terrible design in terms of looking like it could exist. He's got a turkey butt sits on his feet, a head on a neck that would never biologically support a head that big. And so I just remember going, "This is just awful. Like, what a train wreck." And then the movie comes out, and I was like, okay, I was wrong. I admit it. But, you know, that's
great.
You see movies that have great.
Kirk, I thought the same thing about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony made me
I have the same opinion about E.T. It looked terrible. It was a horrible looking design. How the hell could they approve such an ugly thing? But they did. And it worked out.
Tony made me a little sculpt of E.T.'s head mounted on a plaque and his eyes are crossed, and the little word plaque, I don't know if you remember this, Tony, says "ouch."
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah.
That's a great story. I love those stories. That's so cool.
Can I do a follow-up question there? So obviously, you know, with amongst, you know, artists, there's a lot of respect, you know, going back and forth, working on these movies. Did you guys ever run into it, like any situation with like some of the actors, like on set, kind of a little bit of maybe some ego there, or a little, you know, a little memorable moments with the actors?
I would say go ahead.
Tony?
Well, no, because I never interacted with the actors that much. I was always behind the scenes. Kurt may well have done so, though. You know,
I was on
he gets into situations like that.
Yeah. I was on location for almost 6 months, about 2 or 3 in the desert for that was, you know, Jabba's barge, and then another 2.5 in Oregon, Brookings, Oregon, and yeah, there I am on the. Oh, there you go. I will say Carrie Fisher was super fun to hang out with.
I'm sure.
She would go dancing with the crew. We'd go out, you know, those of us who had the energy would go out dancing at whatever little tiny club we found in Yuma, Arizona, and she'd be there having a good time. Mark Hamill was super sweet. His son was like 2, so he didn't really go out and party with the crew, but you could stop by his hotel room. Like we were all in Yuma, and particularly we were all in this one big like Holiday Inn. We basically took it over, and he would sit out on his patio, which kind of faced the pool area, and you could stop by and say hi and just, you know, chat with him. He was so Harrison kept to himself. He smoked more pot than anyone I'd ever seen in my life.
So that's why he crashed the plane.
Well, you would walk by his trailer, and my buddy Peter Rob King was his makeup artist. He would walk. We were going to go to lunch, so I'd wait for him. He'd open the door, and it was like a Cheech and Chong movie. This cloud, and Peter reeked of pot. I'm like,
that's awesome.
You know, and I'm a nice kid from a nice neighborhood. I was like, "Are you guys smoking pot?" You know, and he's like, and Peter's like, "No, it's Harry, but don't tell anyone." But 40 years ago, and I said, "How do you deal with that?" And he goes, "We buy cases of Visine." But whatever, it worked, because my lesson in movie acting was we were doing the skiff guard, so we had to make sure their heads went on and there weren't tears, whatever. So you were right near camera. So there was a scene with Harrison and Mark on the little skiff, or it tipped, and Harrison. Let's see, I don't know how I show this. Harrison's looking up. Well, it looks like a 2-shot, and I was maybe 8 feet away. Camera's about 3 feet away, so it was a tight 2-shot of the two of them. And I was so far away that I couldn't hear what Harrison was saying, but I could hear and see what Mark was saying. So I'm watching the scene, and Mark's like, "Not going. The job is he's gonna blow it up." And Harrison Ford's like, I was like, oh my! I remember thinking, even saying to whoever was there, Phil or Randy or something, "Oh my God, he's so stoned. He's tanking his performance." Mark's selling it like, you know, he's there and he's in the moment, and Harrison's just like a zombie. And then part of my job was to go to dailies and watch the dailies, because Phil didn't want to go there, and I'm just making sure that nothing was wrong with the monsters. The latex. So I'm there at dailies, and the scene is Mark Hamill's like, "We left Flanagan go, and it's gonna be boom." And Harrison's like, "I'll tell you, kid." And so Mark is all over and, you know, really selling it. I don't want to say he's overacting, but big. And Harrison's just like, "I'll tell you, kid." And you're just like, oh, you just sucked into it. It's like that Gary, friend of mine who was friends with Harrison, said his school of acting is fill in the blanks. It was little possible, and it's true. It brings you in. He's like, what's he thinking? What's his, you know? Where Mark is very much like he's in the moment, but that's what played to their strengths. He was a tough old pirate, and Mark was the young guy with the enthusiasm. But it was interesting. So, but those are the two. I mean, Peter Mayhew was a sweetheart. All the Ewoks. Mainly, I worked with Ewoks for like 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
I became really dear friends with some of them. I'm still friends with. You know, Mike Edmonds is still a friend, and Kevin Thompson is a good friend. And it was great. I mean, no one I ever met was a jerk.
Kevin and Debbie Lee Carrington were on a commercial. We did a Star Wars commercial. They were playing Jawas though this time around.
Debbie passed about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know. Actually, she played Cabe from the Cantina in this particular commercial. Kevin was a Jawa, and I don't know. I can't think of the other actor that played the other Jawa. But anyway, Kevin was awesome though. Yeah, and Debbie was amazing.
She was such a sweetheart. There's pictures of her, of she and I like cuddling because it was cold in the forest, so you just put an Ewok on, you would cuddle them. And Brandon from Prop Store sent me a picture from Warren Franklin's film roll, and it's we both look like we're 12. It was really sweet of him to send it to me because we were very, very close. But yeah, I don't have any bad stories about any of the talent that I.
I think I have.
So you were looking for salacious stories there, eh, Gabe?
There it is.
Oh,
that was cute.
Yeah.
You look like you're like 12, man.
I know. Yeah, there's the picture that was from the Ewok movie, actually.
Really?
The one that Brandon sent me was from Jedi, which was 82, and Webby looks like a fetus, and I look like I'm 12.
Hey, it's chilly out here. Toss me another Ewok.
Right. So this is you with all the.
And there's the girl sitting to my camera right. So it'll be on my left. That's Jeannie Loren, the gal in the red hat, who's also you see. You also see her in the Jedi making creature doctrine.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And 2/3 of those women, or all the women in there, save for Jeannie and the gal to, I guess, a camera left. That's Judy Elkins. Everyone else was a local hire from Oregon to help dress and keep the Ewoks alive.
Oh, wow.
George was always money conscious.
I know, right? That is so cool. So I wanted to share one other picture because I know our buddy David always, he really respects you so much, Kirk, and obviously he's the one who kind of got us in touch.
He says that in public.
Yeah, he did this awesome portrait of you, and he told the story when he was on our show. But I just wanted to show it because David's just such an amazing artist, and he really did a great job on this.
That was a gift. He just did that out of the blue, and I adore it. And sadly, nobody wants to buy it autographed, so it's just.
That is awesome. Well, guys, I know we're running really late, and I really appreciate everybody's time and obviously jumping on here. Tony, thank you so much for being on the phone with us this time. I know it probably wasn't as entertaining to not be able to see the stuff, but I'm telling you, from the bottom of our hearts, I'm not only just with the Salacious that's coming out that Tom and you just did such an amazing job, but just as a Star Wars fan, just really kind of going back to that feeling that those movies brought to us, and now as adults we look for it, right? It's a tough world out there, right? A lot of division, but I always say that the one thread that connects us all right now is Star Wars, which is kind of crazy because the fandom just is so broad, and with these new series like Mandalorian, I'm so happy that you're still involved in the franchise, and they're still giving us these memories that will essentially last a lifetime. My kids, again, you not only inspired me as a kid, but now my children watching The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. It's amazing how these things work out like that. But thank you, Tony, so much for your time.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a great pleasure talking to you all, and I do appreciate your sentiments. Who'd have thunk it? All these years later, I'll still be doing this nonsense. For heaven's sake.
Yeah. And Tony, what is there anything, any project or anything you would like to tell folks about that you're working on, or anything I know you make a lot of models, right? A lot of like the dinosaur resin sculpts and things like that. Are you still making?
Well,
those?
I used to do that. There's not such a big market for that anymore. Although I still actually sell some of those overseas in Hong Kong. There seems to be quite a market there.
Okay.
At least there was. But no, I'm on season 4 of The Mandalorian, and I'm enjoying myself. And who knew it was going to go this long? I think we're all surprised by that. But I'm very grateful that I'm still involved. It's an interesting business. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. And Kirk, again, similar, obviously. I mean, the work that you've done, not only just Star Wars, Kirk, but again, and Tony too, obviously with Gremlins and dinosaurs. I actually grew up watching that show like weekly. I love dinosaurs, and even me and my wife still quote it. We're like, not the mama, not the baby. So thank you again.
You know, I gotta say, Star Wars fans are incredibly sweet. I've been to a number of conventions, and you guys are so. I mean, fans in general, but you guys in particular, everyone's so grateful and honest and sweet and sincere. It means a lot because we're just trying to make cool stuff and have fun doing it. But then 40 years later, to have people come up and go like, "Oh my God, I love that you did that," or it's really nice because you don't think about that when you get into this business. At least
And Kirk, is there? So I know you have a website, right, where people could check out a lot of your work and your Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I got. I sign autographs and drawings. I'll do original drawings of stuff I've worked on. I don't do like superheroes, but I'll do Gremlins and dinosaurs characters, and then the latest thing, the only thing I can really talk about that's coming out soon. Oh, that is a great interview. That right there with Phil and I, it's hilarious. We should be. We look like we're like brothers. Yeah. And it's pretty. The thing I was saying earlier about like I was so goofy and he tolerated me. There's a great bit there. And then you can see a bunch of. I think it's a link to my Vimeo page and then Muppets Haunted Mansion is coming out this October.
Yeah.
Are they singing Bohemian Rhapsody there, Kirk?
Yeah, I directed that. I've done it.
Really?
I've worked for the Muppets if you read my website.
Yeah, read.
No, and I know that, but that just looks just like Bohemian Rhapsody.
It is. We did a Muppet version of it. In fact, Queen loved it so much they gave us all their instrumentals. It was all done to Queen's version of them.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Muppet vocals. And then, Muppets Haunted Mansion is coming out on Disney Plus this October, and I directed it.
Perfect. And again, thank you so much. I know the show ran a little longer, but we were having lots of fun and so much information. Really, thank you, Tom. Obviously, we always love having you. And once again, right? This Salacious comes out on Tuesday.
That's right. Tuesday, 12 noon Eastern. Anybody has questions in the meantime, hit us up on Monday. Shoot us an email. You can find us on social. We're at Regal Robot. And then my other company's at Tom Spina Designs if you ever want to see just, cool movie stuff being restored or theming or anything like that. And I'm going to give a shout out to Steven Jimenez in the caption, the comments here, who's quoting the old Star Wars gangster rap Flash animation from like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Just randomly. I don't think it was called for. I don't know that anyone asked for it, but Steven, that's what we needed, and we respect you, sir. Thank you for your service.
That's right.
Awesome.
Tom, I have one question for you. Do you stand up in every interview that you do, or you sat?
I have a bad back. I have a standing station at the house.
Oh, okay.
I try to avoid sitting for really extended lengths of time, and I know that that's the way these podcasts go. So usually I'm staying. I'm also when we have a new person start at the studio, they'll follow me around for a while, and I'll be moving around. I'm like, no, you got to follow like 5 feet away because I dart. I'm always on the move. There's always bouncing back and forth, and guaranteed, you follow too close, we are gonna crash into each other at some point.
That's funny.
And Tom, if you want to hold one of those Salacious Crumbs back for the guy who puppeteered him in the special,
just some guy. Yeah, I'll say maybe that has to be. Maybe we need to do like an extra signature plaque for like the Billy D. Williams special.
There you go. One for me and one for whoever the bidder is. Oh yeah, I get Billy.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you again so much to our guests. Thank you, Lee. Thank you for jumping on and hanging out.
Pleasure to be here, and thanks to Tony and thanks to Tom for making this come to life. And sorry for messaging you weekly, monthly, whatever it was, but yes, thank you guys. It's I never thought I'd get this thing that just looks just like he stepped out of the movie. And
congratulations, Lee.
Thank you. And I pranked Tom pretty good last Saturday.
Oh, yeah. That was bad timing on the whole, but it was he gave me that like, hey, the box arrived, call me. It was one of those like, oh, don't you start like because that usually no. I saw them pack that. There is no way.
But yeah, so Lee's got number 1. I got number 6. So only 144 left, right?
That's right.
So
and they all go up next Tuesday.
43. There you go.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
I love that, Tyler.
Thatcher.
I can pay you over 3 years unless I sell a TV series, and I can buy 3 of them. But
we'll talk. For sure.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I'll sell it to you for a casting of your big Effantmon legs.
He's looking up. We got
great umbrella stands.
That's right. I like how only the puppeteers can manage which way is which on the reverse monitor.
Yeah, it screws me.
I know you did good, Tom.
Well, thank you again, everybody. Everybody that hung out with us throughout the whole time, thank you again. And guys, next week we're gonna be all hanging out in LA in Disneyland. We're gonna probably try to do a little live stream on Saturday Disneyland. So make sure you stay tuned. Tony, again, thank you. Kirk, Tom, everybody. Michael, any kind of final words before we end this?
Yeah, I just Tom, always thank you for coming on the show. You're a super awesome human being, and you're doing a great job over there at Regal Robot. To Kurt and Tony, thank you so very, very much for being on our show. I'm so very humbled. This has a personal connection to me, and I wish I knew Kurt's. I could have whipped his name out when I was going through the tower over at Skywalker Ranch. I might have been able to get in, but
not get arrested,
or it might have got me in jail quicker. I don't know. He's pretty loud, But all kidding aside, you guys are fantastic. Thanks for your evening to our viewers. Thanks for your Saturday evening, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next show. And Gabe, my sidekick, thank you so very much for the hard work putting all the footage together. Yeah, and then Lee, you did a great job.
Look at it, Tom.
Yeah, you did good. Okay.
Well, thank you guys. And for our guests, if you wouldn't mind just sticking around for just 1 second. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next week, guys. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Hey, did everybody go to lunch? What's going on here? Hey.
Hello in TV land.